It was from the Cataclysm. I can illuminate the technological tree. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 Lies from the Strategic Deception Bureau. That night, as the major media compiled the press releases, all major social media in Xia Kingdom were instantly detonated. On the Scarf Hot Search list, 10 red and black hot search terms appeared in unison. Moon, Palace Project, Nanshanman Project, Heaven Plan, Professor Lu is awesome. These 10 hot searches directly caused the server to crash. Countless melon-eating netizens rushed into the comment area to express their excitement. Fuck. What happened? What happened? What happened? As long as I accept my weakness, I will be invincible. Ahem. Sorry, I went to the wrong set. The current editor is getting more and more outrageous. Are the contents of this science fiction novel directly published in the news? Please pay attention to the troubles upstairs. This is the meeting just held by the Xiago Space Agency. These things were all proposed by the first director, Professor Lu. Can anyone tell me what year it is now? I suspect I have traveled through time. Why do I smell the smell of the time when the United States and the Soviet Union were fighting for hegemony? Xiao's well-known military forum was no exception. It was immediately exploded by this news. After dinner, Xiao sat in front of the computer in the room and opened the browser as usual. He entered a domain name into the browser's URL bar with great skill. Tap the enter key lightly. The web page quickly jumped to a military forum. Different from the past. This time there was a line of big words marked in red on the homepage of the military forum. The contents of the NASA meeting are revealed. Xiao frowned slightly. During this period, the name of NASA can be said to be resounding all over the country. It is no exaggeration to say that, wherever there is internet and signal, almost no one is unaware of this newly established department. But, how does this space agency meeting have anything to do with a military forum? There was some confusion in Xiao's eyes. He dragged the mouse and subconsciously clicked on the highlighted red and bold title, Moon Palace Project. Automatic moon mining plan. It will be put into production by the end of this year. WTF. Xiao let go of the mouse and stretched out his hand to rub his eyes. He even doubted himself whether he had seen it wrong. Why did Xiao suddenly propose a moon mining plan? Not to mention anything else, Xiao has not yet truly achieved the goal of landing people on the moon, right? Just like that. Wouldn't it be a fantasy to put the lunar mining project into operation by the end of the year? Professor Lu, is this crazy? Xiao murmured to himself, then opened the penguin colony, took a screenshot of the news in front of him, and sent it. Have you seen this news? Today is not April Fool's Day, right? Did he? Soon, a rapid message tone sounded. Xiao hurriedly opened the penguin colony again to check. Old Xiao, you didn't know until now, did you? As a friendly reminder, the Moon Palace plan is the easiest to implement among the 3 major plans. Old Xiao, you should finish reading the news before talking. Looking at the news among the penguins, Xiao's pupils shrank slightly. 3 major plans, or the simplest one. Xiao quickly closed the interface of the penguin colony and dragged the mouse to take a closer look. Gradually, Xiao's eyes became strange. The Nanshanman project, which has Zhuan Series Air 2 space fighter jets and Luaneo Series Air 2 space carrier platforms, is actually designed to resist alien invasion. WTF. Will it be completed by the end of next year? As he scrolled the mouse wheel, detailed information about the Nanshanman project appeared before his eyes. Zhuan Series Air and space fighter aircraft. Body length 30 to 50 meters maximum takeoff weight. 80 to 100 mil. Cruising speed in the atmosphere 11.2 kilometers/second. Second cosmic speed. Maximum speed outside the atmosphere 16.7 kilometers/second. Third cosmic speed. It uses dual fusion engines and the power system is an electric propulsion system. The main weapons and equipment include small laser rapid-fire cannons, ultra-high-speed medium and long-range air-to-air missiles, can be equipped with nuclear warheads. The Bad series that follows is even more outrageous. The total length of the fuselage is 500 meters. The wingspan is 1,300 meters. The maximum takeoff weight is 300,000 mils. The cruising speed in the atmosphere is Mach 2, and the speed outside the atmosphere can reach the third cosmic speed. As for weapon systems, high energy pulse laser cannons, high power particle diffusion cannons, large missile silos. Seeing this, Zhao Ziji swallowed slightly. Is this thing really a technology we can have next year? Thinking that this was only the second plan, Zhao Ziji hurriedly scrolled down the page. Hiss. Heavenly plan. Good guy. Just by looking at the name, Zhao Ziji can imagine how outrageous this thing must be. First, he looked at the estimated completion time for the project. Within 15 years he suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. After experiencing the excitement of the first two projects, he suddenly felt that the 15-year heaven plan seemed to be the most reliable. But soon, he decided to take back his youthful and ignorant words. Human Deep Space Fleet plan. In the plan, the entire Heavenly Court fleet consists of 1,000 survival starships, 500 material starships, and 1,000 combat starships. Among them, 1,000 survival starships can carry nearly 1 billion Zaya people, with an average of 1 million Zaya people per starship. The maximum flight speed of the entire Heavenly Court fleet will reach 1/10 the speed of light. As for the destination of the Heavenly Court fleet, it is Proxima Centauri, 4.22 light years away. Zhao Ziji took a deep breath. With trembling hands, he opened the Penguin group again and typed 3 exclamation marks in the chat box. Ha ha ha. Another kid got scared. Seeing the reply from the group members, Zhao Ziji smiled bitterly and reached out to type on the keyboard. No, what the hell is this? This thing is obviously something from a science fiction novel, right? How can this be put in the Great Hall of Zaya Country? As soon as Zhao Ziji's complaints were made, someone replied, "Old Zhao, you are still too young. Remember the Star Wars plan originally proposed by the United States." Zhao Ziji's pupils shrank suddenly, and the speed of his fingers tapping increased instantly. You mean this is something made by the Strategic Deception Bureau? The next second, a screenshot was sent to the Penguin group. The screenshot shows a hot search list of Weibo. Congratulations to Professor L.V. Yongchang for succeeding the bureau chief and serving as the director of the Strategic Deception Bureau. Zhao Ziji, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. Yes, this kind of thing, any normal person with an online IQ should not believe it. However, in his mind, the gorgeous scene of the aurora in the sky a few days ago suddenly flashed. Thinking that the two events were only less than a day apart, Zhao Ziji's heart moved slightly. There shouldn't be any connection, right? But soon, he shook his head and threw away his wild thoughts. It shouldn't be possible. It is probably just as the netizen said, just a lie of the Strategic Deception Bureau. Chapter 52 US response, Pathfinder program. At the same time, in the United States across the ocean. In the president's office in the White House in Wharton. Albert's face flushed, and his small eyes stared at Defense Secretary Anthony and CIA Director William Blair in front of him. William Blair, don't you want the hat of the CIA Director? Albert's roar scared the two men so much that they trembled all over. William Blair's eyes twitched slightly. Mr. President, shut up. Albert grabbed the document on the desk and threw it in front of William. I don't want to hear any of your excuses. Just tell me what our CIA is doing. Damn it. Xiago on the other side is ready to rush out of the solar system. And what about us? We are still repairing power equipment all over the country. FXXK. William Blair lowered his head and looked at the document lying at his feet. On the document, a few words about the Moon Palace plan stung his eyes. He was silent for a moment, then slowly said, Mr. President, our intelligence agents in Zaya Country did not obtain any information about this plan before the meeting. I suspect this is just a smoker screen thrown by Zaya Country. Do you still remember the Star Wars plan we proposed decades ago? As soon as William Blair finished speaking, Anthony on the side also said, Mr. President, my opinion is the same as Director Williams. These 3 plans of Zaya Country, in my opinion, it is impossible to achieve. The Words of the two made Albert's face slightly relieved. You mean Xiaogo's 3 so-called space programs are all bluffs? What about the newly established space agency? Is it possible that Xiaogo's newly established department is also bluffing? According to intelligence, Professor Liu Yongchang has a lot of power. William chuckled and asked, Mr. President, will you appoint a 21-year-old young man as the director of NASA? Albert didn't even think about it and shook his head directly. What a joke. A 21-year-old kid should be dating in college. William shrugged, spread his hands, and looked at the president in front of him with a sneer on his face. Albert was stunned for a moment, then suddenly realized. He nodded gently. I roughly understand what you mean. Then, in your opinion, how should we deal with these smoke bombs released by Xiaogo? The reaction on Twitter these 2 days is not very good. We must come up with a countermeasure as soon as possible. Williams' eyes flashed with a bitter smile. Twitter again. How could the United States have such a president? He sighed softly in his heart and then looked at Anthony beside him for help. This kind of thing has nothing to do with his CIA. Anthony pondered for a moment, a gleam in his eyes, and said in a deep voice, Mr. President, I think we need to start the Mars landing plan. Albert's pupils shrank slightly, and his expression suddenly became more serious. Landing on Mars? Are you sure? Anthony nodded slowly but firmly. Although the authenticity of Xia's 3 plans is not high, we can draw a simple conclusion from them. At present, Xia's attention to space has become higher and higher. In order to consolidate the future position of the United States, we must take the lead in mastering space hegemony. That afternoon, the White House of the United States held an emergency press conference. Albert stood on the podium of the press conference and cleared his throat. Everyone, welcome to the White House press conference. In the solar storm a few days ago, the United States suffered extremely serious losses. However, thanks to our strong national strength, we have returned from the steam age to the modern era in just a few days. As he spoke, Albert made a funny gesture. There was a burst of laughter from the audience. Okay, let's get back to the point. Otherwise my secretary will glare at me again. The laughter from the audience became louder and louder. After getting the secretary's white eyes as he wished, Albert straightened his face and spoke again. Everyone, in the pursuit of the future of mankind, the United States has never slowed down its pace. I announce that from now on, the United States will launch a manned landing on Mars plan. Project code Pathfinder. As Albert's voice fell, the press conference fell into silence. More than 10 seconds later, a noisy discussion broke out. Mr. President, may I ask, is this decision of the United States due to the 3 plans just released by Xia country? Mr. President, does this decision of the United States mean the start of an arms race again? Mr. President, looking at the excited reporters in the audience, Albert frowned slightly. He stretched out his hand and pressed it in the air. The discussion gradually subsided. Soon, the press conference site fell into silence again. But the expressions on the faces of the reporters were completely different from a few minutes ago. Every reporter, like a shark that smelled blood, was full of excitement in his eyes. Albert glanced at the audience and said in a deep voice, the purpose of launching the Pathfinder project is to find a second Earth for mankind. Everything the United States does is for the future of mankind. As for Xia's Moon Palace project and Nanshanman project, I sincerely hope that they can turn the content of science fiction into reality. After saying that, Albert did not stop at all, nor did he give the reporters time to ask questions, and turned around and left the press conference. Seeing the president turn around and leave, there was a slight commotion at the press conference. Editor-in-chief, big news, believe me, this will definitely be on the headlines of our newspapers. Just as the reporters were still confused, a voice sounded from a corner. I saw a man in a suit holding his mobile phone with excitement, talking excitedly, and walking quickly towards the gate. This is a reporter from the Wharton Post. Many reporters recognized the man's identity. His behavior also reminded everyone, and a group of reporters picked up the phone and reported the situation of the press conference to the editor-in-chief. In just 2 or 3 hours, the Wharton Post took the lead in launching today's latest newspaper, Moon versus Mars. Who will win in this space race? After the Wharton Post, other newspapers followed suit, and the headlines on the newspapers were even more exaggerated. The second arms race, space race. Zyaglo's ambitions are completely exposed. Chapter 53 Solution Selection, Liquid Lithium. In the information age, news spreads extremely fast. In just a few hours, all the news about what happened in the United States was posted online. Even the official scarf account of ZyGUO News also released a scarf similar to the United States. Everything Zya does is for the development of mankind. This scarf received tons of likes and comments in just a few minutes. Good guy. I call him good guy. That makes sense. Everything we do is to deal with aliens. As for who the aliens are, ahem, we all understand. Damn it. The talent upstairs. Let me tell you, the current situation should be regarded as arms race 2.0, right? Be bold and use the word should instead. To be precise, it's now the space race. Stop talking. I bet on ZyGUO winning. As for why, we have Professor Lu, but they don't. Beijing. Within the first ring road. Chairman Li sat quietly in his office, with a document placed on the desk in front of him. The content of the document is clearly the details of the American Pathfinder project. Chairman Li chuckled and threw aside the document recording the details of the American Pathfinder plan. Minister. Next, start to gradually reduce the scale of irrelevant industries. All resources from the Zya Kingdom will be given priority to the space agency. ZI, the Minister of Finance of Zya State, his pupils shrank suddenly, and he couldn't help but exclaimed, Senior Counselor, I'm afraid this will have a huge impact on Zya State's economy. Counselor. Li glanced at ZI calmly and said softly, this is an order. In addition to reducing the scale of irrelevant industries, starting from today, the export of any resources is prohibited. In addition, steel and various mineral resources are imported from abroad at all costs. Remember, this is an order. Zi's pupils were shocked. He couldn't even imagine what kind of impact these orders would have on the Zya Kingdom today. These measures are implemented slowly, so that the public does not notice any abnormalities. Counselor Li pondered for a moment, and then added again, the current Zya Kingdom cannot withstand too much trouble. Yes. Promise to complete the mission. Zi swallowed slightly, and shouted loudly with a firm expression. Lu Yongchang, who had been secluded in the office for several days, naturally had no idea what was happening in the outside world. Of course, even if he knew, he would probably just sneer at most. What time is it? Why are we still holding on to the competition? Not to mention, at this time, his mind was filled with all kinds of complicated calculations. The huge desk is already filled with all kinds of scratch paper filled with writings. Crack. Lu Yongchang breathed a long sigh of relief and slapped the pen in his hand on the solid wood desk. Succeeded. He stared blankly at the draft paper in front of him, and muttered to himself. On the draft paper, there is a series of extremely beautiful calculations. He stretched out his hand to rub his somewhat red eyes, and took a deep breath. After 3 days, during these 3 days, except for the necessary time for eating and sleeping, he never stopped writing. The hard work paid off, and he finally succeeded in establishing a mathematical model of the sonoluminescence phenomenon. Looking at the mathematical model he had spent so much effort to build, Lu Yongchang filled in the various parameters with an anxious expression. Soon, the calculation results came out. Looking at the calculation data on the draft paper, Lu Yongchang's pupils shrank suddenly. He never imagined that this kind of material would be needed to achieve small-scale controllable nuclear fusion. Lithium metal, the various properties of metallic lithium instantly came to his mind. Lithium, a metallic element, is a silvery white soft metal, and is also the metal with the smallest density. The melting point is 180.54. From this perspective, metallic lithium can really serve as a solution. After all, it only needs to be heated to above 180.54 deg. C to turn it into a liquid state. Lu Yongchang looked at the calculation results in front of him and fell into deep thought. To be honest, using liquid lithium as the reaction solution is a bit unexpected, but if you think about it carefully, it makes sense. After all, lithium metal also has its own unique uses in atomic reactors. While thinking about the feasibility of using liquid lithium as a reaction solution, he stood up from his chair and walked slowly toward the office door. Click. The sound of the office door opening immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the laboratory. Yongchang, you figured it out, Fang Zhu's eyes lit up, and he took the lead to greet Lu Yongchang. How is it? Have you solved it, Lu? Yongchang raised his head, shook the draft paper in his hand, and nodded slightly. Hey, you have dark circles under your eyes. The moment he saw Lu Yongchang's face, Fang Zhu was shocked. You haven't slept for the past 3 days, Fang Zhu's reaction obviously shocked Lu Yongchang. The movement of his hand suddenly stopped, and he subconsciously raised his hand to touch around his eyes. It's not that exaggerated. I've slept for 10 hours in the past 3 days. Fang Zhu looked strange. 0.10 hours. Okay, you better go get some sleep first. If you die suddenly because of this, Chairman Li won't be able to peel off my skin. Lu Yongchang waved his hands indifferently. Don't worry, it's okay. Do the experiment first. We don't have so much time to waste. Seeing Lu Yongchang's appearance, Fang Zhu could only wink at the researcher on the side with a look of helplessness, and then sighed softly. Okay, you are the boss of the laboratory. You have the final say. Speaking of which, what do you want us to do? Hearing Fang Zhu's question, Lu Yongchang subconsciously turned his head and looked at the reaction container placed aside. He frowned slightly and shook his head slowly. No, we need to change the container. Contact the factory. We need to order a special container. Fang Zhu frowned when he heard this. Custom made. A container. This will take a lot of time. I'll tell the factory in advance what solution you plan to use. As he spoke, Fang Zhu picked up paper and pen from the side and prepared to record Lu Yongchang's requirements for the container. Liquid lithium. Lu Yongchang's calm words echoed in the laboratory. Fang Zhu's movement in his hand paused momentarily. The next moment, he suddenly raised his head, looked at Lu Yongchang in front of him with a horrified expression and exclaimed, "What? Liquid lithium? This is too dangerous. No, lithium is the most mobile metal among the known element. Therefore, the danger of simple lithium is extremely high. If you are not careful, it will burn and cause an explosion." Chapter 54. Testing machine comes out. Fang Zhu looked at LV Yongchang in front of him with a complicated expression, and the ballpoint pen in his hand trembled slightly. Solid lithium is dangerous, not to mention liquid lithium heated to above 180.54. Now, LV Yongchang actually told him that he wanted to use liquid lithium as the reaction solution for controlled nuclear fusion. That's nuclear fusion, the most violent reaction in the entire star system. Not only Fang Zhu, but all the researchers and professors around him looked strange after hearing that liquid lithium was used as a solution. Ahem, Professor LV, how about, let's think about it again. Lu Hang on the side cleared his throat and persuaded in a good voice. LV Yongchang glanced around and saw the faces of everyone, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. Well, to be honest, he also felt that this plan was not very safe. But which experiment related to nuclear physics is really safe? LV Yongchang pondered for a moment and walked to the demonstration whiteboard next to the laboratory. He reached out and picked up the black marker beside him and wrote a series of complex and beautiful formulas on it. Everyone, this is the mathematical model of the sonoluminescence phenomenon. To ignite nuclear fusion in a solution, we must make the temperature of the bubble collapse reach hundreds of millions of degrees Celsius, and this can only be achieved with liquid lithium. As he spoke, LV Yongchang waved his right hand quickly and wrote down the detailed calculation process on the whiteboard. Fang Zhu looked at the formula on the demonstration whiteboard thoughtfully and nodded slightly. As one of the top academicians, Fang Zhu quickly followed the ideas of LV Yongchang's explanation and got the answer. He sighed softly and said helplessly, if the mathematical model is not wrong, then liquid lithium may really be our only choice. LV Yongchang chuckled. In my opinion, liquid lithium is not a helpless choice. On the contrary, it is the best choice for small fusion reactors. As he spoke, LV Yongchang wrote a symbol heavily on the demonstration whiteboard. .6. The moment he saw this symbol, Fang Zhu's pupils shrank suddenly. He understood. He understood everything. Yongchang, you are going to use the physical property of lithium-6. A trace of excitement flashed in Fang Zhu's eyes, and he subconsciously stretched out his right hand and rubbed his nose vigorously. Yes, you are right. Liquid lithium is the best choice for small fusion reactors. Seeing Fang Zhu's excited face, LV Yongchang's eyes flashed with a smile. It's worthy of being Fang Zhu. He grasped the key points at the first time. Unlike Fang Zhu, the researchers and professors around him all looked at LV Yongchang with confusion. LV Yongchang naturally didn't keep the secret for too long, and he started to explain directly. Lithium-6 atoms have a physical property that is easily overlooked. When bombarded by neutrons, it releases tritium atoms. Hearing LV Yongchang's explanation, the expressions on everyone's faces suddenly choked. That's it. Once the deuterium-tritium fusion reaction is triggered, it will naturally release a large number of neutrons. After these neutrons bombard the surrounding liquid Li6, the liquid Li6 will release a large number of tritium atoms. In this way, compared with the Pangu No. 1 fusion reactor, the small fusion reactor does not even need to replenish tritium gas. It only needs to replenish the cheapest deuterium gas regularly to maintain the operation of the fusion reactor for a long time. Yongchang, I'll contact the factory now, Fang Zhu said excitedly. I didn't realize it just now, but now it seems that this is simply the best solution to the miniaturization of fusion reactors. 3 days later, a huge iron sheet factory building was built out of thin air on an open space 1,000 meters away from the first laboratory of Xiaguo Point. In the center of the factory building, there is a dark black cylindrical container. The container is about 2 meters high and about 1 meter in diameter. At the bottom of the container, there is a huge ultrasonic generator. This seemingly simple container is the test machine of the small fusion reactor. Looking at the device in front of him, Lu Yongchang's eyes flashed with a sigh. It has to be said that after gathering most of Xiaguo's resources, the progress of the experiment has been accelerated infinitely. 3 days ago, Fang Zhu had just contacted the factory, and in just 1 hour, the drawings of the test machine of the small fusion reactor were placed in front of Lu Yongchang. Next, Xiaguo not only completed the manufacturing of the test machine within 3 days, but even for safety reasons, Xiaguo specially built an iron sheet factory building on the open space to serve as a temporary experimental site. Yongchang, when do we start the experiment? Fang Zhu turned his head to look at the test machine in the center of the factory, and a trace of heat flashed in his eyes. This is a small fusion reactor. As a top academician in the field of nuclear fusion, Fang Zhu knows the value of this thing better than anyone else. Unlike large fusion reactors, small fusion reactors will not be used in the civilian field. It will only shine in the military field. Thinking of the future Xiaguo's aircraft carriers, submarines or fighters, all using nuclear fusion as energy, Fang Zhu's heart began to beat violently. No, hurry, let's wait for someone first. LV Yongchang's words came from the side. Waiting for someone? Fang Zhu was stunned and asked subconsciously, waiting for whom? LV Yongchang's eyes passed Fang Zhu and looked into the distance. Here they come. Fang Zhu quickly turned his head and looked in the direction where LV Yongchang was looking. He saw a black hunky car slowly driving towards the iron sheet factory. The license plate number was naturally the familiar string of numbers. The chairman is here. Fang Zhu was shocked and exclaimed softly, let's go. LV Yongchang straightened his clothes. We should go to greet him. So small. Yongchang, are you sure this thing can carry out controlled nuclear fusion? As soon as he saw the test machine, Counselor Li questioned LV Yongchang. Faced with doubts, LV Yongchang naturally responded with a smile. Mr. Counselor, this thing doesn't matter how big it is. It's just a test machine now. If it succeeds, its size can be made even smaller. When the time comes, it can be installed on your car. Remember, Lee smacked his lips, obviously not believing LV Yongchang's words. The power generation of this thing should not be as good as Pangu number 1, right? LV Yongchang's expression suddenly choked. Point, isn't this nonsense? What is Pangu number 1? Its area alone is 20 square kilometers. How big is this small fusion reactor? Seeing LV Yongchang's humiliation, Fang Zhu on the side immediately showed a knowing smile on his face. Point, however, no matter how you laugh, if the boss is humiliated, the subordinates still need to help explain and defend. Ahem. Senator, different sizes naturally mean different powers. Fang Zhu continued, according to estimates, the power of this small fusion reactor in front of you should be around 1000 megawatts. The senator raised his eyebrows sharply. 1000 megawatts. This is a lot of power. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, Preliminary Mastery of Fusion Reactor Miniaturization Technology. This gadget has such high power generation. The chairman of the Senate glanced at the small fusion reactor test machine in the center of the factory with some surprise. 1000 megawatts. This is an extremely terrifying power generation. You know, the power of a household diesel generator is about 3 to 10 kilowatts. Even the Nimitz class aircraft carrier that the United States is proud of has a total power of only about 280 megawatts. In other words, the black cylinder in front of you, which is about half a person tall, can drive an aircraft carrier effortless. Thinking of this, a fiery color flashed in the eyes of the chairman of the council for an instant. If this technology matures, in time, Zhao will have the absolute right to speak on Earth. When will the experiment begin? The speaker asked somewhat eagerly. Point, there was a hint of hesitation in Fang Zhu's eyes. This is a nuclear test after all. After hesitating for a long time, he said softly, President, how about you stay away? Don't underestimate this black cylinder. It's filled with liquid lithium. If something unexpected happens, a look of horror flashed in the chairman's eyes. Liquid lithium plus nuclear fusion. Even a layman like him knows how dangerous this thing is, but he still shook his head slowly. No, senior counselor. Fang Zhu suddenly became anxious. Senior counselor, your safety. The chairman of the council glanced at Fang Zhu indifferently. Point, the unquestionable look on his face instantly interrupted Fang Zhu's unsaid words. Don't worry about me. Since Professor Liu Yongchang has not backed down, how can I, the chairman of the parliament, have the nerve to be a coward? Yongchang, start testing. Liu Yongchang on the side nodded slightly, then turned to the researchers responsible for the control and shouted loudly, the experiment begins. Start the heating. As Liu Yongchang finished speaking, a researcher quickly lowered his head and pressed a few buttons on the console in front of him. Point, a low humming sound began to sound. This is a trace of doubt flashed in the chairman's eyes. Liu Yongchang hurriedly explained, the melting point of metallic lithium is 180.54 deg. C, so a period of preheating is required before the fusion reactor is started. The speaker nodded slightly. Approximately. How long will it take? About 10 minutes. It should be faster once the technology matures. That's right. That's right. The council chairman nodded repeatedly, his eyes becoming more and more brilliant. 10 minutes of warm-up time is perfectly acceptable. After all, under normal circumstances, this kind of fusion reactor will only be loaded on aircraft carriers or submarines. For aircraft carriers and submarines, the startup time of more than 10 minutes is not too short. Professor Liu, the metallic lithium has been completely melted. A researcher's shout came from the side. Point, after hearing this, Liu Yongchang's expression suddenly became serious. Start the ultrasonic generator. Inject deuterium and tritium gas mixture. As Liu Yongchang's order was issued, a string of fine bubbles slowly rose from the bottom of the black container under the vibration of ultrasonic waves. The bubbles begin to shrink regularly. When the bubble shrinks to the extreme, a dazzling light emanates from the core of the bubble. At that moment, the temperature inside the bubble rose directly to 150 million degrees Celsius. The deuterium-tritium fusion reaction was ignited. A Large number of neutrons detected. 1. Researcher shouted excitedly. At the same time, the neutron dose detector nearby also sounded sirens. Looking at the smoothly running curve on the computer screen, Yongchang slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Is this a success? The chairman of the parliament put his head in front of the computer screen, looked at the dense curves and numbers on it, swallowed slightly, and asked in a low voice, "It's done, Lu." Yongchang showed a bit of joy on his face and said decisively. At the same time, deep in his consciousness, a flash of fluorescent green light slowly emerged. The next moment, his consciousness came to that mysterious green space again. On the tree-like structure, a bit of crystal white light slowly lit up. Fusion reactor miniaturization technology. Preliminary mastery. The first experiment lasted about a minute point. Because no matching generator was installed, the energy emitted was dissipated into the surrounding air through the heatsink point. After the experiment came to an end, Yongchang pondered for a moment, turned to Chairman Li and said, "Chairman, I have something to tell you." "Counselor." Li raised his eyebrows slightly, then nodded slightly. "Go ahead, Fang Zhu," who was standing by, saw this and was about to leave, but Yongchang grabbed his arm. "Brother Zhu, you should also listen to this." Seeing this scene, the doubt in Congressman Li's eyes became more intense. "Senior Counselor, I need to summon all the scientific researchers in the aerospace field in Xia State." Representative Li's pupils shrank suddenly. "All scientific researchers in the aerospace field? This is a big deal. What are you going to do?" After a moment of silence, Counselor Li asked softly. Yongchang didn't hesitate at all and said softly, "Aerospace plane. The transportation efficiency of traditional rockets is too low. Xia State needs more advanced transportation methods." After hesitating for a moment, he added again, "Chairman, if possible, I need the engineers responsible for manufacturing the J-30. In addition, there are engineers who manufacture the Long March 10th carrier rocket." As soon as the voice fell, Fang Zhu on the side suddenly turned his head to look at Yongchang and shouted in a hurried tone, "Yongchang, these engineers are the country's heavy weapons. You can't mess around." After that, Fang Zhu hurriedly apologized to the chairman. "Chairman, Yongchang doesn't know the rules." The chairman raised his hand gently and interrupted Fang Zhu's words. The next moment, he looked at Yongchang with a firm face, meaningfully smiled and nodded. "Okay, since you need these engineers, I will transfer them to you." Fang Zhu stood there blankly. "Crazy, all crazy. These engineers are the treasures of Xiago. Can they be borrowed casually? Then, what about the research on the J-30 and Long March 10th? Fang Zhu looked at Counselor Li in disbelief. As an academician of the Xia Academy of Sciences, Fang Zhu naturally knew some secrets that ordinary people didn't know. Xia started the research project on the J-30 and Long March 10th 5 years ago. After 5 years, Fang Zhu estimated that these two extremely important projects should have reached the most critical point. Counselor Li chuckled, and a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. Stop. When did it stop?" Fang Zhu's eyes widened suddenly. Can this kind of research task be stopped? Is Counselor Li bluffing him? Looking at Fang Zhu's surprised look, a faint smile appeared on the counselor's face, and then he said with a firm look, "It's stopped now." "I said it." Chapter 56. Emperor Putin is moved. Not to mention how shocked Fang Zhu was by Chairman Li's words. At least, Yongchang has truly seen the courage of this session of the Xia State Parliament Speaker. "Just do it. The worst case scenario is to start over from scratch. Professor Lu, I have left the fate of the country in your hands." The speaker looked at Yongchang meaningfully and said slowly, "Don't let me down, Lu." Yongchang looked serious and nodded vigorously. "When are you going to start research on the aerospace plane project, Lu?" Yongchang frowned slightly when he heard the question from the Speaker of Parliament. Although there are currently several engineering teams working together near the nuclear physics laboratory, we want to completely complete the construction of these laboratories. A conservative estimate is that it will take at least about a month. A month-long gap period is something Yongchang cannot accept. After pondering for a moment, Yongchang said, "President of the Parliament, the highest standard aerospace laboratory in Xia Kingdom, before Lu Yongchang could finish his words, the speaker raised his eyebrows and interrupted him. Zia. GUO National Aerospace Research Institute. The Long March 10th carrier rocket mission is carried out there. Is that enough? Lu Yongchang was stunned for a moment, then a hint of joy flashed in his eyes, and he nodded repeatedly. That's enough. That's enough. Then, speaker, I will report there tomorrow. Hearing Lu Yongchang's words, Fang Zhu suddenly became anxious regardless of the fact that Lu Yongchang was still talking to the speaker. He directly grabbed Lu Yongchang's arm and whispered, "Are you crazy? The miniaturization of fusion reactors has not been completely completed yet." Lu Yongchang was stunned again and turned to look at the test machine that was turning off in the center of the venue point. The next second, he took a deep breath and looked at Fang Zhu beside him solemnly. "Brother Zhu, this difficult task is left to you." Fang Zhu. Aren't you the chief engineer? Fang Zhu felt as if 10,000 alpacas were running past in his heart. Why did the task of miniaturizing the fusion reactor suddenly fall on him? But obviously, Lu Yongchang didn't care about Fang Zhu's words. He waved his hand casually and followed the chairman of the council and walked out. Faintly, Fang Zhu also heard the conversation between the two. "Yongchang, why don't you complete the task of miniaturizing the fusion reactor first?" The chairman's voice was a little uneasy. "Fang Zhu, is it okay?" "Hey, it's okay. Council chairman, don't worry." Lu Yongchang said carelessly. "I know Fang Zhu's abilities. The most important part of this fusion reactor is completed. All that's left is to put a shell on it. It's very simple. I believe brother Zhu." Fang Zhu. He slowly turned his head and glanced at the test machine. The matching generator has not been designed yet, and the cooling device is not perfect. Is this called a shell? Blanche. Fang Zhu couldn't help but cursed in his heart. Su country. Emperor Jingpu sat behind his desk, looking at the document in front of him. A look of contemplation flashed across his face. In the past 6 months, too many things have happened internationally. First, the Xia kingdom next door was framed and withdrew from the ITER project. Subsequently, in just a few months, Xia state actually achieved overtaking in a corner and mastered controllable nuclear fusion technology before all other countries. Looking at the Pangu 1 fusion reactor data officially reported by Xia state, Emperor Jingpu couldn't sit still. Su state is different from Xia state. Although heavy industry is developed, it does not have that large population after all. He estimated that 2 of the fusion reactors of the size of Pangu 1 could completely meet all the energy needs of the Soviet Union. This is a huge opportunity for the Soviet Union. In addition to the petroleum raw materials needed for industrial production, the Soviet Union, which has controllable nuclear fusion, can completely abandon inferior energy sources such as oil and natural gas. The Su country, which already has poor economic conditions, can save a lot of money. Somebody come. The more Emperor Jingpu thought about it, the more excited he became, and he shouted loudly outside the office door. The next second, the office door opened, and a sturdy man looked at Emperor Jingpu with respect. "Your Excellency, what are your orders?" "Tell the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that I need to go to Xia Kingdom in 2 days." Emperor Jingpu said in a tone that left no room for doubt. That night, Xia GUO's #1 laboratory. Tuck tuck tuck. There was a knock on Lu Yongchang's office door. Lu Yongchang, who was immersed in preparing for the aerospace aircraft project, was stunned when he heard a knock on the door. He subconsciously turned his head and glanced at the clock on the wall. 21:50 p.m. It's so late. Who else is coming here? The door is unlocked. Come in. Squeak. The office door knob was turned. Looking at the figure standing outside the door, Lu Yongchang quickly stood up and greeted. "Hang Bu, why did you come here in person?" Hang Kaiming waved his hands helplessly and walked into the office with a wry smile. "Stop talking. Ever since Naoshi Taiyang's accident, I haven't gone to bed before 12 o'clock. Hearing this, Lu Yongchang's eyes flashed with a smile. "Hang Bu came to me to complain today." While speaking, LV Yongchang stood up and made a cup of tea for Han Kaiming, authentic Westlake Longjing. "This was brought to me by a researcher below. I usually don't want to drink it." Han Kaiming reached out and picked up the teacup and sniffed it gently. "Wow. It smells pretty good. You. Kid, you are so young, and you are accepting the gift. Han Kaiming looked at Lu Yongchang with a smile. Although I'm the Minister of Science and Technology, it is not good for you to say these things in front of me. Lu Yongchang touched his nose helplessly. Minister Hong, you can't say that. I bought it from him at the market price. If you don't drink it, don't waste my tea. Han Kaiming laughed dumbly, took a sip of tea, and said in a deep voice, okay, I won't say any more nonsense. I came here to ask a question for the chairman of the parliament. Lu Yongchang quickly put down the teacup in his hand and straightened his face. Minister Hong, you say, Emperor Jingpu of Sujiuo will come to Zhajiuo in half a month. Han Kaiming said meaningfully, the news has not spread yet. Guess what it's for. Lu Yongchang's brows wrinkled instantly. Emperor Jingpu of Sujiuo. Why is he coming to Zha country all of a sudden? Suddenly, Lu Yongchang had an idea in his mind. Controlled nuclear fusion. Lu Yongchang asked in a low voice. Snap, Minister. Han snapped his fingers in approval. Yes, according to the information from Zha country's second security bureau, Emperor Jingpu is very interested in the Pangu fusion reactor. Chapter 57 Zha nation needs allies. Lu Yongchang suddenly realized, after thinking for a moment. Indeed, for the Soviet Union, controllable nuclear fusion has an irreplaceable attraction point. After all, the Soviet Union has begun building a large number of nuclear fission power plants since the last century. What did the chairman ask you to ask me? Upon hearing Lu Yongchang's question, Han Kaiming's eyes flashed with unknown meaning, and he responded softly, the chairman asked me to ask you how Zhajiuo should handle this matter. Lu Yongchang's expression changed slightly, and he subconsciously said, Boo Hong, I don't want to get involved in this kind of political affairs. Han Kaiming was stunned, chuckled, waved his hands and said, I said the wrong thing. What the chairman means is, how should Zha country deal with controllable nuclear fusion technology? Lu Yongchang was stunned. That's what I was asking, he said without hesitation. Of course, take it out. Han Kaiming's brows frowned instantly. Take it out. What's the reason? You know, the speaker and a member of the House of Representatives held a meeting for several hours over this matter. It can be said that almost every congressman advocates that Zhajiuo should have controllable nuclear fusion technology in its hands. This time I came to ask Lu Yongchang to go through a process. After all, as the first administrator of the space agency, Lu Yongchang also has a great say in this kind of matter. Originally, in Han Kaiming's view, Lu Yongchang was the person least likely to agree to the outflow of nuclear fusion technology. This is the hard work he developed himself. Han Kaiming has been sitting as Minister of Science and Technology for so long, and this is the first time he has seen a scientist willing to give away the results of his hard work to others. Perhaps because of the dim lighting, Lu Yongchang did not notice the look on Han Kaiming's face at this time. He thought to himself and said, Han Bu, facing the next disaster, it is impossible for Zha Kingdom to survive alone. We have to have some reliable allies. No matter how you look at it, the Soviet Union is the goal we must strive for. The look on Han Kaiming's face relaxed a little. Lu Yongchang's statement was also mentioned by some members at the meeting. But then, why not wait a few years? Han Kaiming whispered, Yongchang, Zha state is now in a stage of rapid development. As long as we hold nuclear fusion technology in our hands, Zha country will be able to turn around completely in just 3 years. Lu Yongchang slowly shook his head. It's too late. It is estimated that in 1 or 2 years, the changes in the sun will be known to everyone. Han Kaiming's pupils shrank suddenly. So fast? Lu Yongchang nodded slightly. Don't forget, the abnormality in the sun was first discovered by a laboratory in the United States. This sentence instantly awakened Han Kaiming. There was a bit of bitterness on his face. It seems Zhajiuo's current measures are still too conservative. With that said, Han Kaiming briefly explained to Lu Yongchang several resource bans issued by the chairman of the parliament. After listening, Lu Yongchang fell into deep thought. For a long time, he slowly exhaled a breath. Han Bu, I have an idea. The Next day. At the entrance of ZIGUO National Aerospace Research Institute. 3 armed helicopters painted in military green landed slowly. As the first director of Xi State's space agency and the hope of Xi State's future. At this moment, Lu Yongchang's personal safety issue has received great attention. You may not be able to feel it in the laboratory. But once he went out, Lu Yongchang completely felt that the chairman of the parliament attached great importance to his safety. 3 heavily armed helicopter gunships were considered a small scene. According to Han Kaiming, if it weren't for the fact that the helicopter was too slow, the council leader would have wished to send a few J-20s to escort them. This is still in the interior of Xia Kingdom. Lu Yongchang has no doubt that if he needs to go abroad one day, Xia Kingdom will even send an aircraft carrier fleet to escort him. When the helicopter stopped, Lu Yongchang jumped off the deck of the helicopter in the middle. Looking at the National Aerospace Research Institute with its door open in front of him, Lu Yongchang's eyes flashed with excitement. Here, he will lead Xia Kingdom to take the first step towards the Sea of Stars. As soon as he entered the laboratory, Lu Yongchang noticed the difference between the National Aerospace Laboratory and other laboratories in the laboratory. Researchers wearing white coats can be seen everywhere. The faces of every scientific researcher were filled with nervousness and solemnity. This is completely different from the laboratory at Sandao University. However, when Lu Yongchang thought about it, it was normal. After all, this is where ZIGUO studies the Long March 10th heavy lift launch vehicle. Hello, Professor Lu. Just as Lu Yongchang stood at the door and watched the scientific researchers busy, a hoarse voice came from the side. He quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of the sound. I saw a middle-aged man with white temples and a pair of thick gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose looking at him apologetically. Professor Lu, I'm sorry. I just received the order from above yesterday. We were still sorting out the experimental equipment and couldn't spare the time to pick you up. Lu Yongchang twitched the corners of his mouth and showed a kind smile. It's not in the way. It's not in the way. If I remember correctly, you should be academician Ko Liang K, right? A strange color flashed in the middle-aged man's eyes, and he nodded gently and said, Professor Lu, do you know me? LV. Yongchang's mouth twitched twice, and he said a little embarrassedly, I have seen your name in college textbooks. Ko Liang K. He suddenly realized that in terms of level, the young man in front of him, who was several levels higher than him, was still a sophomore. Ko Liang K wiped the sweat from his forehead with an embarrassed look and silently complained about the efficiency of Sandao University in his heart. He must call Jiang Yangxing to ask that guy someday. Is it so difficult to issue a graduation certificate? Ahem. Ko Liang K coughed hard, trying to change the subject to ease the awkward atmosphere at the moment. Let me introduce myself. Ko Liang K, an academician of the Xia Academy of Sciences, currently serving as the director of the Xia National Aerospace Research Institute. While speaking, Ko Liang K stretched out his right hand to LV Yongchang. Seeing this, LV Yongchang also hurriedly stretched out his right hand and shook Ko Liang K's calloused right hand hard. Academician Ko, can you help gather the researchers in the institute? LV Yongchang said in a deep voice. I need to hold a meeting first to arrange the next tasks. Ko Liang K readily agreed. Of course, he didn't dare to disagree. Just last night, he received an order from his superior. The order was very simple. Just one sentence. Unconditionally obey any arrangement of Professor LV Yongchang. Chapter 58 Hall Thruster Solution. More than 30 minutes later in the conference room of the Xia National Space Research Institute. At the urging of Ko Liang K, all the researchers in the institute quickly sat down in their seats. LV Yongchang stood in front of the conference table, looked around at everyone with a serious look, and then reached out to turn on the projector. Everyone, I believe everyone has received the notice from the upper level. The Long March 10th Heavy Lift Carrier Rocket Project will stop research and development from now on. Although everyone present received this news last night, at this moment, every researcher still showed a bit of sadness and reluctance on his face. With a research cycle of 5 years, it is no exaggeration to say that the Long March 10th Heavy Lift Carrier Rocket Project is like a child that these researchers have carefully cared for. I I'm also doing research, and I can understand the pain in your hearts, but I believe everyone knows the current situation of Xia. Feeling the heavy atmosphere in the conference room, LV Yongchang took a deep breath and then pressed the left mouse button. Xia needs a more effective way to promote it. The changing light of the projector attracted everyone's attention. Electric propulsion technology. Electric propulsion. This is impossible. In just a moment, the conference room became noisy. A voice of doubt followed and reached LV Yongchang's ears. Ko Liang-K, the director of the institute, changed his expression slightly and looked at LV Yongchang with a puzzled look. Ahem. Seeing the discussion in the conference room getting louder and louder, Ko Liang-K had to stand up and coughed lightly. Professor LV, the electric propulsion system you are talking about is the Hall thruster. LV Yongchang nodded lightly, with a smile in his eyes. Why? Academician Ko has research in this area. Ko Liang-K's pupils shrank suddenly. Hall thruster. It is indeed a Hall thruster. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Professor Liu, if you want to use Hall thrusters instead of chemical fuel rockets, I advise you to give up as soon as possible. LV Yongchang's eyes showed some doubts. What do you mean? Ko Liang-K sighed slightly. Professor Liu, you should be interested in the specific impulse of the Hall thruster, right? LV Yongchang's expression condensed slightly and then nodded. Seeing this scene, Ko Liang-K's eyes were more bitter. Our institute has done research on the Hall thruster project a long time ago. At first, we were all full of confidence in it, and even many academicians believed that the Hall thruster was the most perfect propulsion system. Unfortunately, reality is always much more cruel than imagination. In the laboratory, the maximum thrust of the Hall thruster is about 200 millinewtons. Speaking of this, Ko Liang-K sighed deeply again. Professor Liu, what can 200 millinewtons do? In the atmosphere, it can only push a few A4 papers, right? With this, do you think the Hall thruster can replace the traditional chemical rocket? Faced with Ko Liang-K's doubts, Liu Yongchang chuckled and said calmly, Academician Ko, don't be in a hurry. It's not too late to make a judgment after listening to me first. While speaking, Liu Yongchang gently pressed the mouse again. Academician Ko, please ask, what is the power of the original Hall thruster in the institute? Ko Liang-K looked at a black cylinder on the projection screen and was stunned. What is this? With his knowledge, he couldn't recognize the object in the picture. Hearing Liu Yongchang's question, he subconsciously answered, about 20 kilowatts. Liu Yongchang understood. The next moment, a mysterious smile appeared on LV Yongchang's face. What if I say that I can increase the power to more than 1000 megawatts? Ko Liang-K took a breath of cold air. Even though he had been through a lot, he couldn't stand the shock in his heart and jumped up from the chair beside the conference table. What did you say? 1000 megawatts. A faint smile appeared on the corner of LV Yongchang's mouth, and he nodded gently. Ko Liang-K's pupils trembled slightly. He swallowed lightly and asked in a hoarse voice, Professor LV, do you know what 1000 megawatts means? Could it be that you want Pangu number 1 to power it? Speaking of this, Ko Liang-K's heart moved slightly. A crazy idea slowly emerged from his mind. Could it be that? He turned his head suddenly and looked at the projection screen beside him. Pangu number 1 is not that bad. LV Yongchang nodded with a smile and continued, but there is a miniaturized fusion reactor. What? Fuck? What the hell? Instantly, several exclamations rang out in the conference room. Ignoring these noises, LV Yongchang straightened his face and pointed to the projection screen. Let me introduce it to you. The latest achievement of the first laboratory of Xia country, the miniaturization technology of fusion reactors. What you see in front of you is the core part of the small fusion reactor, which is equivalent to the reactor of Pangu number 1, 2 meters high and 1 meter in diameter. The current rated power is 1000 megawatts. After the voice fell, the conference room fell into silence. Ko Liang-K stood blankly beside the conference table, his hands trembling slightly because of excitement. Professor Liu, is what you said true? It's Not that he didn't trust Liu Yongchang's words, it's just that all this is too incredible. Not long ago, the Pangu No. 1 fusion reactor was just launched. Just over a month later, the fusion reactor miniaturization technology was placed in front of him. Ko Liang even stretched out his hand and grabbed his thigh fiercely. Hiss. It hurts. Of course it's true. Liu Yongchang's face became serious. Yesterday, under the witness of Councillor Li, the first ignition experiment of the small fusion reactor was a complete success. Although the matching power generation device has not yet been designed, I can guarantee that within a month, the small fusion reactor technology will be completely mature. Ko Liang took a deep breath. I have to say that he was moved! 1000 megawatts of power. Even with the simplest and crudest multiple conversion, the whole thrust of the small fusion reactor can have a full 1mm thrust. Then, what about the heating and loss problems? Ko Liang's heart moved slightly, and he remembered a very important question. General wires cannot withstand the strong current of a small fusion reactor. LV Yongchang chuckled and pressed the mouse again. How about room temperature superconducting coils? What? Ko Liang's eyes widened suddenly. Xiago already has room temperature superconductor technology. Otherwise, academician Ko, how do you think we built Pangu No. 1, LV? Yongchang asked back happily. Because of the confidentiality agreement, most scientific researchers are not aware of the black technology contained in Pangu No. 1. Chapter 59 Sujiuo, I can pay any price. Ko Liang's breathing was a little rapid. Room temperature superconductors plus a 1000 megawatt small fusion reactor. The combination of the two is definitely not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Ko Liang swallowed his saliva slightly and cast his eyes on the young man standing beside him. Unbelievable. All of this was done by the young man in front of him, who was only 21 years old. Half a month later, a flight from the Soviet Union slowly landed on the straight runway of the Beijing airport. As the door of the plane opened, the figure of Emperor Putin appeared on the plane's gangway. Mr. President, welcome to Xiago. When Emperor Putin walked down the gangway, a staff member of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs hurried forward to say hello. Emperor Putin, who had something to ask for, was easy to talk to. A kind smile appeared on his face, and he nodded gently to the staff member of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Hello, hello. Looking at that kind smile, the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs couldn't help but feel a chill on his back. He quickly turned sideways and extended his hand to say, Mr. Jingpu, Speaker Li is waiting for you at the Dioite State Guest House. The smile on Emperor Jingpu's face became more and more intense. He nodded gently and followed the staff's instructions to enter a black Hankey sedan. Xiago, Dioite State Guest House reception room. Emperor Jingpu sat on the left of Speaker Li. Speaker Li, congratulations to Xiago for mastering the controlled nuclear fusion technology. Faced with Emperor Jingpu's compliments, Speaker Li smiled faintly. He nodded gently and said, thank you. After that, Speaker Li picked up the teacup on the table and sipped the tea in it. Emperor Jingpu, thank you. What's next? That's it. He glanced at Speaker Li's leisurely look, and a bit of helplessness appeared in the depths of his eyes. Speaker Li, I came to Xia this time, mainly to discuss a cooperation project with your country. Oh, what cooperation project? The speaker's eyes flashed with a smile, and he said lightly, Mr. Jingpu can speak boldly. With the friendship between our two countries, I believe that most projects are not a problem. The helplessness in Emperor Jingpu's eyes became more and more intense. Facing Senator Li, who pretended to be stupid, he could only sigh deeply. Speaker, I will speak directly. How to sell Xia's controlled nuclear fusion technology? As Emperor Jingpu's voice fell, the reception room instantly became quiet. Emperor Jingpu looked at Senator Li beside him nervously. Although he did not show any strange expression, Senator Li next to him still keenly noticed a trace of panic in Emperor Jingpu's eyes. A few minutes passed. Member Li sighed softly. Mr. Jingpu, controlled nuclear fusion is a technology that Xia has just developed. In principle, we are not prepared to. Emperor Jingpu's eyes flashed with disappointment. To be honest, this result was within his expectations, but he still said unwillingly, what if I say that the Soviet Union can pay any price, member? Lee's voice paused slightly, and his expression did not change at all. But, considering the friendly relations between your country and our country, we can share this technology with your country, Emperor. Jingpu, looking at the usual look of Counselor Lee, Emperor Jingpu sighed deeply in his heart again. It seems that Counselor Lee has long been eyeing this piece of fat meat. Name a price, Counselor. Emperor Jingpu leaned back on the chair and said with despair, how much do you want? The Counselor chuckled, and the words that Han Kaiming said to him some time ago came to his mind. Member, Professor Liu suggested that we use nuclear fusion technology to exchange for some necessary resources. Speaker Lee shook his head slowly. No, I don't need money. A trace of doubt flashed in Emperor Putin's eyes, and then a trace of vigilance appeared in his eyes. Speaker, territorial integrity is the bottom line that the Soviet Union cannot compromise. Speaker Lee's mouth twitched slightly. Don't worry, I don't want land. Tsar needs resources, a lot of resources. After some friendly negotiations and discussions, Emperor Putin and the speaker signed a cooperation agreement. In the next year, the Soviet Union will transport a large amount of iron ore, copper ore and nickel ore to Tsar. In addition, the Soviet Union will also pay Tsar a considerable amount of rare earth resources in exchange. The Soviet Union also got the controlled nuclear fusion technology as it wished. A few days later, the Tsar news channel broadcast this news. Recently, Emperor Putin of the Soviet Union visited Tsar. Speaker Lee had a friendly conversation with him and reached a consensus on controlled nuclear fusion. As soon as the news was broadcast, the whole Tsar was in an uproar. The Weibo hot search list was updated quickly. Xiaoguo sells controlled nuclear fusion technology. How much did the Soviet Union pay for controlled nuclear fusion? There are countless comments under the official Weibo account of Xiaoguo News. Xiao, what is this? Are they selling controlled nuclear fusion technology? What are the top leaders of Xiaoguo thinking? This is controlled nuclear fusion. We are the only ones in the world who have it. No, just for such a small amount of minerals, they sold controlled nuclear fusion? Are you crazy? The above, this is not just a little mineral. According to the reported data, the resources paid by the Soviet Union this time, calculated, even exceeded $20 billion. No matter how much more, it doesn't make sense. Xiaoguo finally took the lead once, but now it has to give up the advantage. Among the quarreling comments, one comment stood out and received the most likes. Is there a possibility that Xiaoguo has mastered more advanced fusion technology, so it sold relatively backward technology to others? Fuck. What you said makes sense. As we all know, the technology of the rabbit family usually has 3 generations. The first generation is sold, the second generation is used, and the third generation is tested, not only in China, but also abroad. The cooperation agreement between the Soviet Union and Xiaoguo was shocked. There was a debate on Twitter. Does Tsar sell controlled nuclear fusion technology now? Sugo can buy it, then can our country buy it? Haha, what are you dreaming about? Don't you know what the relationship between Sugo and Xiaoguo is? I think we can give it a try. At Albert, Mr. President, here comes the job. Since we can't research controlled nuclear fusion, why don't we just buy a ready-made one? Hahaha, I don't think Albert will pay attention to you. Unexpectedly, President Albert liked this tweet immediately and responded, I'm considering this matter. Believe me, no one knows Xiaoguo better than me. Chapter 60 Packaged Sale of Controlled Nuclear Fusion Technology. Just as foreign countries were quarreling over this matter, Tsar's Ministry of Science and Technology quietly released a draft on packaged sales of controlled nuclear fusion technology. The statement is very simple, only a few lines. Controllable nuclear fusion reactor technology, $10 billion. Controllable nuclear fusion magnetic fluid generator technology, $10 billion. Normal temperature superconducting technology, $10 billion. Daily maintenance and installation work, $5 billion. Packaged price of a complete set of controllable nuclear fusion technology, $28 billion US. Note, Zaya State only accepts mineral resources of equal value and does not accept any form of cash or other forms of assets. The above is the entire content of this draft point. It's more of a quote than a draft point. Magic City point. Zayozaji stared at the news on his phone with his mouth open. Point. What the hell? Packaged for sale. Controllable nuclear fusion technology. Can these words be said together? Could it be a spoof of the news? He quickly glanced at the press release. Party. Zaya State Ministry of Science and Technology. Zayozaji couldn't help but fell into silence. I always feel like there are so many things in my mouth that I want to spit out, but I don't know where to start. With a flick of his finger, he shared the news with the Penguin Group. What the hell? Did I read it wrong? Controlled nuclear fusion is packaged and sold. Blanche it, and you can get a 20% discount if you buy it in a package. It's very ginkgo-like looking. At the reactions of the group of friends, Zayozaji gently typed a line of text. I don't know why, but now I'm more and more convinced that Zayaji has mastered the second generation nuclear fusion technology. Zayozaji's words immediately attracted a burst of approval. That makes sense. It's just Rabbit's traditional art. Base slot. Number 6. Give way. Our company specializes in refurbishing nuclear warheads, polishing submarines, recycling second-hand aircraft carriers, repairing leaks on aircraft carriers and submarines, overhauling nuclear reactors, maintaining and refurbishing space shuttles, and scrubbing dust on the surface of satellites during high-altitude operations. Amidst the bragging chat, a reply caught Zayozaji's attention. Am I the only one who noticed the last note? Zaya Kingdom only accepts mineral resources of equal value in exchange. Zayozaji's eyes moved slightly, and he quickly opened the news interface to check it carefully. This item is indeed noted in the precautions. This is strange. Logically speaking, Zaya Kingdom does not lack mineral resources. It is even a major exporter of ores. Why are you now suddenly starting to use nuclear fusion technology to acquire ore resources? Zayozaji subconsciously turned on the computer next to him and searched the browser for the ore export volume of Zaya State in the past year. You wouldn't know this if you didn't search it, but you'll be shocked if you search it. In just half a year, Zaya's ore export volume has dropped to a freezing point. Zayozaji licked his dry lips. A hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. He quickly found the Zaya Kingdom's ore import and export data for the past 2 years. Looking at the comparative data on the computer screen, Zayozaji took a sharp breath. In just half a year, the export volume of Zaya's ore resources dropped by 90% year on year. Correspondingly, Zaya's ore resource imports increased by 50% year on year. Is something big going to happen? Zayozaji swallowed and muttered to himself. With the release of this draft, the entire international situation suddenly turned into chaos. The White House of the United States. Damn, what is Zayaji doing? Albert looked at the document in front of him, the corners of his eyes twitching violently. Professor Collins, who was standing aside, said softly with an uneasy look on his face, Your Excellency, I think we should purchase this technology from Zayaji. Professor Collins, what did you say? Albert raised his head suddenly and looked at Professor Collins in front of him in disbelief. When will the United States purchase technology from Zayaji? Professor Collins' eyes were full of bitterness. Your Excellency, I know this is difficult to accept, but there's no way around it. If other countries purchase controllable nuclear fusion technology from Zaya, we will be passive. Albert's face gradually turned red. He stretched out his hand and slapped it hard on the solid wood desk in front of him. Damn Zayaji, FXXK, where is our controllable nuclear fusion technology? Professor Collins, answer me, where is our nuclear fusion technology advanced? Professor Collins was silent for a moment and then slowly said, a quarter of the construction plan has been completed. Crack. Albert stretched out his hand, slapped his forehead, and muttered, then all our early investment has been in vain. Facing Albert's question, Collins nodded solemnly. I think so. I'm afraid, Your Excellency, according to intelligence, Zaya's fusion reactor uses a stellarator structure, which is completely different from the experimental reactor we are building. So, Albert sighed deeply and waved his right hand feebly, interrupting Colin's words just now. He had a premonition point, it seems, that the United States is going to decline in his hands. Unlike the United States, Western European countries were in a frenzy at this time. Controlled nuclear fusion technology. That's controlled nuclear fusion technology. Jilly took the lead in making a decision and called Zaya. Hello, I need to buy a full set of controlled nuclear fusion technology. 28 billion mineral resources. Give me some time. Jilly will get it together. The staff responsible for answering the phone smiled. Do you need other services? For example, outsourcing construction projects. I believe that Zaya's construction speed will satisfy you. The Prime Minister of Jilly showed some intention in his eyes. This charging issue. Just add another $500 million of mineral resources. The Prime Minister of Jilly showed some bitterness in his eyes. Forget it. He is still worried about the 28 billion mineral resources. Add another 500 million. Isn't this going to kill him? As if aware of the difficulties of the Prime Minister of Chile, the staff smiled and said, in fact, it doesn't necessarily have to be mineral resources. Lithography, technology, or other high-end technology can be used for exchange. The Prime Minister of Chile breathed slightly and said with difficulty, I need to discuss it, please. Hurry up. After all, Gaul has also sent a message. The staff reminded kindly. Okay, I will give you a reply as soon as possible. The Prime Minister of Chile wiped the sweat from his forehead and hung up the phone quickly. Looking at the quotation sheet in front of him, an idea flashed through the Prime Minister of Chile's mind. Perhaps Zayago, which has been suppressed by them for decades, is going to rise completely. Chapter 61. Sakura country? Sorry, not for sale. The controversy over Zayago's packaged sale of controlled nuclear fusion technology is getting bigger and bigger. Just after Western European countries purchase nuclear fusion technology, the United States across the ocean finally couldn't sit still. Albert finally couldn't bear the pressure from all sides and dialed Zayago's national hotline. Ahem. Senator Lee, long time no see, in the White House President's Office of the United States. Albert frowned and said against his will, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to have this conversation with you. Hearing the voice coming from the transoceanic phone, Speaker Lee's eyes suddenly showed a little smile. President Albert, hello, how are you doing recently? On the other side of the ocean. Albert listened to the voice in the microphone and his mouth twitched slightly. How are you doing? Is this a question that should be asked on the national hotline? But thinking of the purpose of this call, Albert had to pinch his nose and said, thank you for your concern, Speaker. I'm in good health recently. Haha, that's good. Good health is the most important. Mr. Albert, at your age, you have to take good care of yourself. The meaningful voice in the microphone made Albert's forehead full of black lines. What does this mean? What do you mean my age? What's wrong with my age? If it weren't for the fact that he needed help from others, Albert would have wanted to curse directly at the microphone. Ahem. Speaker, let's talk about business. Albert said stiffly, I heard that your country is selling controlled nuclear fusion technology abroad. The smile in the speaker's eyes became more and more intense. Of course. What? President Albert is interested in this technology. Has the United States not developed this technology yet? Albert's face suddenly darkened. Damn. He naturally heard the teasing meaning in the speaker's words. Although he wanted to hang up the phone directly, he had to bow his head under the eaves. Well, the United States has mastered the controlled nuclear fusion technology. Albert rolled his eyes and lied casually. It's just that the technology is still in the laboratory and has not yet fully matured. No, those researchers are very slow, Counselor. Lee chuckled and changed the subject in a very relaxed tone. Oh. Then Mr. Albert's purpose of calling this time is not to complain to me about the low efficiency of your country's researchers. Albert. Ahem. He coughed hard twice and then said awkwardly, it's not about this. After some friendly negotiations. The United States finally bought the full set of controlled nuclear fusion technology when Tsar announced that the United States had purchased the full set of controlled nuclear fusion technology. All Tsar people, no, all countries were shocked. Ha ha ha. Good guy. I just called him good guy. I thought the United States could be tougher. I didn't expect that it couldn't resist the temptation of controlled nuclear fusion. Is there any big hand to count how many copies of controlled nuclear fusion technology Tsar has sold now? There is no official notification. I guess the Western powers should have bought it. Here, we have to mention our Saudi dog big customer. I heard that they not only bought a full set of technology, but also paid a lot of money to pay for Tsar's construction team. What? Dog big customer? That's our good brother. And like a number of Western developed countries, the Sakura country, located next to Tsar, is not living very comfortably. Please, our country really needs this technology. In the reception room of Dioite State Guest House, the Prime Minister of Sakura country looked solemn and bent his waist to counsel Lily Point. Unlike other countries, Sakura country is surrounded by the sea. Point as an island country, Sakura country has extremely scarce domestic resources. The power of nuclear power plants is the source of most of their domestic electricity. Point originally, nuclear fission power plants could barely meet the needs of Sakura country. But the successive earthquakes and tsunamis in recent years have sounded the alarm for the top leaders of Sakura country. Point nuclear fission power plants are too dangerous, but Sakura country cannot do without nuclear power plants. Therefore, when they learned that Tsar country was selling controlled nuclear fusion technology, the top leaders of Sakura country were the first to be unable to sit still in order to show their sincerity. Sakura country specially sent their prime minister to negotiate in person with Tsar country. Point. But sincerity is sincerity. But the result does not seem to be very good. Point. Looking at the prime minister of Sakura country bowing to him in front of him, Council Lily gently picked up the teacup beside the table and sipped the tea in the cup. Sorry, we don't sell this technology. The moment he heard this, the Prime Minister of Sakura country turned pale. Point. He quickly straightened up and bowed again. Point. This time the degree of bending was much greater than the last time. Point. Even his forehead hit his knees. Please, sell it to Sakura country. We can negotiate. Sakura country is willing to pay any price for it. Speaker. Lee put down the teacup in his hand, and his expression became a little serious. He stood up slowly, looking at the Prime Minister of Sakura country in front of him with extremely stern eyes. Tsar country's technology will never be sold to a country that dares not even acknowledge its history. Not now, and even less in the future. Did you hear clearly? The Prime Minister of Sakura country's face flushed red. He stood up and pursed his lips as if he wanted to say something. Point. But Chairman Lee suddenly waved his hand to interrupt him. Come on, show the guests in just a few hours. The fact that Sakura country tried to buy controlled nuclear fusion technology and was rejected caused a heated discussion on Weibo. Ha ha ha. Well done. Can't we sell this technology to these little Sakura people who live a good life? Don't we have nuclear fission power plants? Let them live with nuclear power plants in the future. Am I the only one who thinks this is not good? The high-level officials of Tsar country have lost Tsar country's reputation by doing this. Reputation? What reputation? Have you seen the United States talk about credibility in the past? The former Tsar country. Hello everyone. I'm Tsar country. I'm very civilized and reasonable, and you can come to me if you have any problems. The current Tsar country. Hello everyone. I'm Tsar country. I'm the reason. Chairman Lee sat in his office, watching the domestic response to this incident, and a trace of relief flashed in the depths of his eyes. How many years have passed? This is the first time that Xiago has been so proud of itself in the international arena. Great. Really great. The Minister of Finance CZI, who was standing nearby, also had an excited look in his eyes. Chairman, now our mineral resources should be barely enough, although a set of nuclear fusion technology only requires $28 billion of mineral resources. The quantity is too large. The chairman nodded slightly, and after thinking for a moment, he said, no hurry, arrange for the factory to smelt these ores first, store them well after smelting. How to use them? Wait for news from Yongchang. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Hardcore Rumor Refutation. Tuk tuk tuk. As soon as the speaker finished speaking, there was a rapid knock on the door. Enter. The council member frowned slightly and spoke in a short but powerful tone. The next moment, the office door was pushed open. Outside the door, Han Kaiming's face turned slightly red and his eyes flashed with excitement. Minister. Han? What happened? Seeing Han Kaiming's appearance, the chairman's eyes showed some doubts in his impression. Han Kaiming had never been so out of his mind. President. Good news. Good news, Han Kaiming shouted loudly. The news just came from Fangzhou that the small fusion reactor project has been successful. The congressman's body shook violently. Before he could fully react, Han Kaiming blurted out his second sentence. Not only that, Professor Liu has successfully developed the first generation Hall thruster. Now, even the chairman of the parliament can't hold himself back. What? So fast? Councillor Lee stood up from his chair with a loud sound and looked at Han Kaiming with excitement. When will the experiments start? Han Kaiming swallowed slightly. Currently, the military is transporting small fusion reactors to the Aerospace Research Institute. It is estimated that in 2 hours, Professor Liu will start the first experiment, the entrance to a highway in Ziguo. What's going on? So why is this highway closed? In a Havel car, a man frowned and looked ahead. Isn't there a car accident? Next to the man is a gentlewoman with long short hair. The woman rolled down the window and looked forward. It shouldn't be a car accident. There's not a single car on the highway. It's probably just the entrance that's closed. Hearing this, the man's eyes flashed with anxiety. He reached out to unbuckle his seatbelt and pulled open the car door. Hey, what are you doing? The woman's expression changed slightly, and she quickly reminded loudly, this is a highway, don't mess around. The man paused for a moment, then turned to look at the woman helplessly. I'll go to the toll station to ask about the situation. I'll be back soon. After a few minutes the man walked to the highway toll booth window. Looking at the staff inside, the man pondered for a moment, then stepped forward to talk. Brother, what's the situation on this highway? What happened inside? Hearing the man's voice, the staff member raised his head and glanced at the man, then shook his head helplessly. I don't know either. I just received an order from my superiors that this section of the highway will be closed for half an hour. The man nodded thoughtfully. An order from a superior. Could it be that he was transporting some important supplies? The next moment, a burst of sirens and roars attracted the man's attention. The man quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of the sound. The next moment, his pupils shrank suddenly. In the sky, 5 armed helicopters roared past. He could even see the air-to-surface missiles hanging underground from the armed helicopters. At the same time, 3 police cars with sirens sounding appeared in his sight. 3 police vehicles lined up in a herringbone shape to clear the way ahead, followed closely by 6 military vehicles painted in military green. There are several heavy machine guns with a cold glow on the roof of the military vehicle. In the center of the military vehicle convoy is a heavy truck with 5.0 vision in both eyes. The man could barely see clearly what was loaded on the heavy truck. A black cylindrical object. When the toll station staff wasn't paying attention, he quickly took out his mobile phone and took a photo of the truck. What's going on? Seeing the man's hurried look, the gentlewoman frowned slightly and asked softly, did the staff give any reason? There was a bit of excitement in the man's eyes, and he put his hand in front of his mouth and made a shushing gesture. The woman's expression suddenly suffocated. Although she didn't know what happened, she still shut her mouth immediately. The man quickly jumped into the car. After closing the car door, he breathed a sigh of relief. After relieving his nervousness, he said to the woman with a mysterious face, you will never guess what happened. What's going on? The woman frowned even deeper. The country is transporting military supplies, the man said, taking out his mobile phone from his pocket and showing the photos he took. Did You see, police cars are clearing the way and military vehicles are escorting us. This posture is definitely for transporting military supplies. Seeing the man's vow, the woman turned her head suspiciously and glanced at the photos on her phone. A dark cylindrical object. This, what is this? The man frowned and slowly shook his head. I don't know. What new type of weapon might it be? As he spoke, the man opened his cell phone scarf. Hey, don't spread this photo blindly. The woman's face changed slightly, and her voice became shrill. The man ignored the woman's words and just stared at the phone screen blankly. There is no need for me to upload it. The official has come out to refute the rumors. As the man spoke, he raised his phone to the woman's eyes. The woman subconsciously looked at the phone screen. Latest Weibo from Xiaguo News official account. Urgent rumor refutation. Today, many highways in Xiaguo are closed. Internet rumors say that they are used to transport military supplies. Xiaguo News hereby refutes the rumor. This is not military supplies. The photo of the dark black cylindrical object that appeared on the internet is the latest small fusion reactor prototype developed by Xiaguo. It is not the so-called military supplies. The woman subconsciously took the phone and stretched out her finger to drag to the comment area below the Weibo. Fuck you. I would call it the most hardcore rumor busting in history. Zuo, you might as well say it's military supplies. Is there anyone who can refute rumors like you? What did I say? Rabbit's traditional art is back. Ha ha ha. Sympathize with Western countries for a second. They just bought the first generation of technology, and in a blink of an eye, Xiaguo took out a second generation prototype. Ah, you sure it's a prototype? Why does it look like a finished product to me? Don't believe in rumors or spread them. If the official says it's a prototype, then it's a prototype. Rabbit. Guess if I have a third generation product in my hands. Xiaguo National Space Research Institute. The basic principle and structure of the whole thruster are not very difficult and can even be said to be quite simple. The main factors that limit its function are power and loss issues. Therefore, after LV Yongchang solved the two major problems, the research progress bar of the whole thruster instantly advanced a lot, with the strong cooperation of Ko Liangke and a group of top engineers. In just over 10 days, the prototype of the first generation of Hall thrusters appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 63 Trial Run. 100 kN. On the test bench in the institute, a dark black donut-shaped engine exudes a mysterious color. This is the research result of everyone in the past 10 days. Improved Hall thruster. To be more precise, it is the Hall propulsion unit. Next to it is a small cylindrical nuclear fusion device. At this time, the small nuclear fusion device is a whole circle larger than the beginning because of the installation of various facilities, but even so, it is still the slimmest one among all large generators. The jet nozzle of the whole propulsion unit is facing a concrete wall made of special materials. The function of this wall is very simple. Block the jet tail of the whole propulsion unit. The working fluid used in the whole propulsion unit is the high temperature helium ion flow generated by nuclear fusion. Therefore, the jet tail temperature of the whole propulsion unit is extremely high. It can even reach hundreds of millions of degrees Celsius. Professor Lu, all inspections have been completed, and the whole propulsion unit can start trial operation at any time. Hearing the report from his side, Lu Yongchang looked a little more solemn. He nodded carefully, prepare to start the trial run. Yes, with LV Yongchang's order, the eyes of a group of researchers in the institute suddenly became excited. Although this is not the first Hall thruster in human history, but it is definitely the first Hall thruster in human history with a thrust of Kn level. As the small fusion reactor slowly started, a low humming sound followed. The small fusion reactor is working normally. The power output is normal. Prepare to start the Hall propulsion unit. Academician Ko Liangke on the side swallowed slightly, and his right hand trembled slightly as he pressed the button on the console in front of him. The next moment, a blue plasma flow appeared at the jet outlet of the Hall propulsion unit. As the operating power of the Hall propulsion unit continued to increase, the light of the plasma flow gradually became stronger. The thrust data displayed on the screen in front of everyone also gradually increased. 1 kN, 10 kN, 50 kN, 100 kN. The thrust data gradually stabilized. Ko Liang K, who was standing by, stared at the thrust numbers in front of him in a daze. The next moment, a flash of excitement appeared in his eyes. Success. We succeeded. 100 kN. 10 density thrust. This is 10 density thrust. Ko. Liang K's lips trembled slightly, and his eyes were obsessed with the faint blue light in front of him. Beautiful, so beautiful. This faint blue flame symbolizes that human aerospace technology has entered a new era. Chemical fuel, at this moment, has become a thing of the past. After a brief joy, LV Yongchang took the lead in calming down. Okay, let's stop the whole propulsion unit first. Stop? Why stop? Ko Liang K frowned subconsciously. Just strike while the iron is hot and test the various data of the whole propulsion unit. LV. Yongchang smiled bitterly and shook his head. Academician Ko. Before that, why don't you take a look at that concrete wall? Ko. Liang K was stunned and turned his head to look at the concrete wall in the distance. I saw that a deep pit had been burned in the middle of the 1-meter thick concrete wall. Seeing that the wall was about to be burned through, he finally reacted and pressed the stop button in a hurry. Facing LV Yongchang's cheesing eyes, Ko Liang K couldn't help but blush. He was angry and said, "Fuck, who is responsible for this wall? What kind of shit material is used? It can't hold up in just a few minutes. Did you cut corners for me?" Director Ko. "Yes, I'm responsible." A researcher stepped forward with a wry smile. "The materials used are approved by you, and they are already the best quality batch." Ko. Liang K. An hour after the trial run ended, Han Kaiming finally rushed to the Institute of Aerospace from Beijing. Originally, Councillor Li was going to come in person, but because of some trivial matters, the task finally fell on Han Kaiming. "Minister Han, why are you here?" Seeing Han Kaiming, LV Yongchang's eyes were full of surprise. "Didn't you just return to Beijing this morning?" Han Kaiming glanced at LV Yongchang with a face full of resentment. "What do you think? I, the Minister of Science and Technology, am almost your errand boy now." Thinking carefully, it seems to be the case. Since LV Yongchang appeared, he, the Minister of Science and Technology, has slowly become the mouthpiece between the chairman of the parliament and LV Yongchang. LV Yongchang, who knew he was in the wrong, smiled awkwardly and did not reply. Han Kaiming did not continue the topic. He straightened his face and said, "What do you mean? Is the experiment about to start?" LV Yongchang. The experiment is over." Han Kaiming. "What the hell? It's over? Then he came here for nothing." Han Kaiming looked like he had eaten shit. Ahem. "But I can tell you the result." Looking at Han Kaiming's changing expression, Lu Yongchang hurriedly said, "The test run was a complete success, and the thrust of a single whole propulsion unit is 100 kN. Han Kaiming was slightly startled and muttered to himself, 100 kN. 1 kilogram is approximately equal to 9.8 newtons. Lu Yongchang, almost 10 miles of thrust. 10 secrets? So few?" Han Kaiming's brows frowned instantly. "I remember that the maximum takeoff thrust of the CF6 engine of the Boeing 747 can reach about 105 miles, right? Isn't 10-mile thrust a bit too low for an aerospace aircraft?" Lu Yongchang chuckled. "Minister Han, you still didn't understand what I said. The thrust of a single whole propulsion unit is 10 mil. I never said that only one whole propulsion unit can be installed on an aerospace plane." Han Kaiming's pupils shrank suddenly. He swallowed slightly and said hesitantly, "You mean we can install a large number of whole propulsion units on an aerospace plane?" Lu Yongchang nodded slightly and shook his head quickly. A trace of doubt flashed in Han Kaiming's eyes. "Yongchang, what do you mean by nodding and shaking your head?" Lu Yongchang pondered for a moment and said slowly, "It's like this. Although in theory it is possible to install whole propulsion units without restrictions, the actual situation is not like this. We need to comprehensively consider the size and purpose of the aerospace aircraft and calculate a reasonable thrust." Han Kaiming nodded as if understanding, then waved his hand and said, "Hey, why are you telling me these professional things? Just tell me how many whole propulsion units you plan to install on the first aerospace plane." I have to report to the chairman, Lu. Yongchang laughed dumbly, shook his head and said, 10. Chapter 64. Have you ever heard of a person with great strength who can send bricks flying? After hearing LV Yongchang's words, Han Kaiming had no reaction, but Ko Lianke on the side could not help but exclaimed, 10. Hall propulsion units, didn't we say before that 5 propulsion units would be enough? Han Kaiming narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at LV Yongchang with a strange look. Yongchang, you can't say this nonsense. If the chairman of the parliament blames me, I can't bear it. LV Yongchang smiled bitterly and shook his head and hurriedly explained, at the beginning, our plan was indeed to install 5 Hall propulsion units, although the thrust of 50 mils is not as good as that of large passenger aircraft such as Boeing 747. It is enough for smaller space planes. It can even be said to be more than enough. Han Kaiming's eyes were more puzzled. Then why? LV Yongchang pondered for a moment and said, in the original design, the maximum flight altitude of the first generation of space planes was within 2,000 kilometers, which is the Earth's near-Earth orbit. Later, I thought about it carefully. Since we are going to make space planes, why not just make the best? Why not double the number of Hall propulsion units and enlarge the aircraft frame? Although the manufacturing difficulty may increase slightly, the performance of this first generation of space planes will be greatly improved. According to calculations, this space plane will be able to take off directly from the ground to the moon. The fuel it carries will be enough to support 2 round-trip flights between the Earth and the moon. Han Kaiming took a breath. Good guy. What did he hear? Take off directly to the moon and be able to go back and forth twice? Looking at the wide eyes of academician Ko Lianke, Han Kaiming suddenly felt that he was a little out of control of the situation. Wait, Professor Lu, are you sure that what you said are all verified data? Seeing Lu Yongchang nod his head in affirmation, Han Kaiming's pupils shrank slightly, and then he reached out and took out his mobile phone from his pocket. Wait a minute, I need to report the situation to the chairman of the parliament. A few minutes later, Han Kaiming hung up the phone with a complicated expression. What did the chairman of the parliament say? Lu Yongchang asked Han Kaiming with curiosity facing Lu Yongchang's question. Han Kaiming glanced at him with a strange expression and then slowly shook his head. I really don't know what kind of magic potion you gave to the chairman of the parliament. Member Lee asked me to fully cooperate with your research plan. If you need anything, just tell me. Lu Yongchang's expression was slightly startled, as if he thought of something. His eyes moved slightly, and he said directly, Minister Hong, so, I really have a problem that needs your help. Han Kaiming's voice suddenly paused, and his face became more and more strange. You say it, but I have said it in advance. We will not do anything that violates the principle. LV Yongchang, he smiled bitterly and touched the tip of his nose and said unhappily, Minister Hong, you think too highly of me. I dare not do this thing that violates the principle. Let's get back to the topic. LV Yongchang's expression became a little serious. The first generation of aerospace plane lacks 3 pilots. Pilot Han Kaiming waved his hand nonchalantly and said, this is a small matter. When the time comes, I will take you directly to the Air Force Brigade to pick someone. To Han Kaiming's surprise, LV Yongchang shook his head and rejected his proposal. Minister Hong, I'm afraid this won't work. The requirements for pilots of aerospace planes are higher, and I'm afraid the Air Force Brigade can't meet its requirements. Hearing LV Yongchang's words, Han Kaiming's face flashed a trace of astonishment. What the hell? The pilots of the Air Force group can't meet the requirements. He glanced at LV Yongchang with a surprised look, and after a moment of silence, he said, Yongchang, don't you know the pilots of the Air Force group? If ordinary pilots can't meet the requirements, you can just pick those golden helmet ace pilots. Don't worry, those pilots are absolutely skilled. LV Yongchang smiled bitterly and shook his head. It's not a problem of flying skills. Han Kaiming was more and more confused. According to my expectations, this aerospace plane needs to perform multiple flight missions to the moon. In my opinion, flying skills are a secondary option. LV Yongchang said meaningfully, sufficient spaceflight experience is what aerospace plane pilots need most, unlike ordinary aircraft in the atmosphere. The powerful enough power of the aerospace plane can easily solve most unexpected situations in the atmosphere. After all, there is an old saying that goes, a brick can fly with great force. What aerodynamics? It doesn't exist. As long as the power is strong enough, even a brick can fly you out of the solar system. In addition, most of the time, when the space shuttle is performing its mission, it is outside the geosynchronous orbit. Therefore, sufficient spaceflight experience has become one of the necessary conditions for space shuttle pilots. After listening to LV Yongchang's explanation, Han Kaiming nodded gently. So that's it. In that case, I'll go to the Xiago Astronaut Research and Training Center to help you. I'll help you find 3 astronauts who have been to space. Is that okay? Hearing Han Kaiming's words, LV Yongchang pondered for a moment and slowly shook his head. I'm afraid it's not possible yet, Minister. Han, don't forget that this aerospace plane is not a rocket. The pilot must also take into account the flight mission within the atmosphere. Han Kaiming sighed softly. This is troublesome. Not only must you master the skills of flying within the atmosphere, but you must also have sufficient space flight experience. You must also meet a series of other age and physical fitness requirements. Although he has not conducted an investigation, Han Kaiming can still conclude that Xiago should not be able to find talents that meet the standard. Not to mention Xiago. It is estimated that it is difficult to find such talents on the entire Earth. Han Kaiming's eyes moved slightly, and he whispered, how about, I will pick 3 astronauts and send them to the Air Force Base for training for a period of time. LV Yongchang's eyes suddenly lit up. This is a good idea, but a concern immediately came to his mind. How long will the training at the Air Force Base take? Han Kaiming frowned and shook his head slowly. I'm not sure about this either. I estimate it will take half a year to a year. No. Too slow. LV Yongchang frowned and glanced at the calendar next to him. April 3rd. Give them a month of training at most. LV Yongchang said firmly. After a month, I estimate that Xiago's first space plane can be manufactured. Chapter 65 Space Station Project Cancelled. Xiago Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Base. Baixuan walked out of the centrifuge cockpit with empty steps. As a Xiago astronaut, overweight adaptation training is his daily fixed training program. Although he has trained for countless days and nights, the pain caused by the centrifuge has not eased at all. He slowly exhaled a breath and turned to look at the centrifuge behind him. I don't know when Xiago's space station project will be completed. Thinking of this, Baixuan's eyes dimmed a bit. He had heard some rumors recently. The upper management seems to be cancelling the original space station project. Even some planned manned space missions face the risk of being cancelled at any time. In this way, where is the future for these astronauts? Baixuan sighed deeply. Just as he was packing up his messy mood and preparing to head to the next training facility, a broadcast sound came from the loudspeaker next to him. Baixuan, Hongfan, Zaiwan. Today's training mission is cancelled. Please go to the lobby on the first floor immediately. After hearing the announcement, Baixuan's eyes moved slightly. Hongfan, Zaiwan. Not only did he know these 2 people, but he was also very familiar with them. To be precise, the 3 of them are all preliminary members of the Xia State Space Station project. Could it be said that the space station project is making progress? Thinking of this, Baixuan's eyes flashed with excitement. Elevator in trance. Brother Zuan, a crisp call came from behind Baixuan. Baixuan's eyes moved slightly, and he turned his head to look. The moment he saw the visitor, a faint smile appeared in his eyes. Wan, how's your recent training going? Speaking of which, we haven't seen each other for several days, right, Xia? Wan smiled and nodded. I've taken leave these days, so it's normal for Brother Zuan that you can't see me. Ask for leave. Baixuan's eyes moved slightly, and he asked quickly, what happened, Xia? Wan fell into silence. After a long time, she sighed softly and whispered, I may have to quit. What? Quit? Baixuan's pupils shrank suddenly and he exclaimed. At the same time, another hoarse male voice sounded from a distance. Wanai, what did you say? Do you want to quit? Hearing this highly recognizable voice, Baixuan quickly turned around, stretched out his hand in the direction of the voice and said, hello, brother. Zuan, what's going on? It's so good. Why is Wanai quitting? Hang Fan hurriedly ran to the two of them and asked in a low voice. Baixuan shrugged and cast doubtful eyes on Wanai, who looked gloomy next to him. Tell me, what's going on? Well, why did you suddenly quit? Have you forgotten that the three of us are a group? Wanai bit her lips gently. A look of confusion flashed in her eyes. Brother Zuan, I'm sorry. I got the exact news from the elders in my family a few days ago. The Zaya State Space Station project has been confirmed to be cancelled. So the moment Zaya Wanai's voice fell, Baixuan and Han Fan's breath suddenly suffocated. Although he was somewhat expecting this result, Baixuan still couldn't control his emotions the moment he heard the exact news. He stretched out his hand and hammered the wall next to him. Damn it, what happened to Zaya Guo? Why was the space station plan suddenly cancelled? Zaya Wanai slowly shook her head. I don't know the specific reason, but I heard that it was the order personally issued by the chairman of the council. This sentence completely shattered the remaining luck in the hearts of the two of them. Han Fan's eyes dimmed instantly. After a long time, he asked in a hoarse voice, then, what should we do? The three astronauts fell silent. Baixuan sighed deeply. Yeah, what should they do? They have been preparing for the space station project for several years. Not only various trainings on the ground, but also space missions. The three of them have performed more than once. As an astronaut who has carried out several space missions, after experiencing the zero-gravity environment in space, he always imagined being able to return to space one day. The space station project proposed by Zaya Guo some time ago is the best way for him to return to space. But now, with just one sentence, all their efforts were in vain. Baixuan deeply experienced the feeling of the collapse of the Taoist heartbeat. The sound of the elevator arriving broke the silence between the three of them. The elevator is here. Let's get down. Baixuan had a very sad smile on his face and took the lead towards the elevator. The moment he entered the elevator, Baixuan's eyes flashed with deep confusion. The broadcast told them to go down. Was it to tell them the news alone? The elevator runs very fast. In just a few dozen seconds, with a crisp beep, the elevator door slowly opened. The incandescent sunlight shines on the snow-white tiles, bringing an extremely strong reflection. Baixuan subconsciously closed his eyes. The strong light signal passes through the retina, through the optic nerve, optic chiasm and optic tract, and then through the superior colliculosome to the protectal area. Under the electrical signal of the oculomotor nerve, the pupillary sphincter began to contract. In just a few seconds, Baixuan adapted to the strong light in the hall. In the bright hall, there stood two tall men. Baixuan's eyes moved slightly. He recognized the man facing them. That was Han Kaiming, the Minister of Science and Technology of Zaya. Minister Han, why is he here? Zaya Wanai whispered from the side. Baixuan moved his lips slightly without making a sound. I don't know. Let's take it one step at a time. Anyway, we already know the worst situation. Hearing this, Han Fan and Zaya Wanai suddenly showed a bitter smile in their eyes. That's right. Now it's the worst situation. They are here. The moment he saw Baixuan and the other two, Han Kaiming's eyes suddenly lit up, and he shouted to the three people, why are you standing there? Come over here. Lu Yongchang slowly turned around and looked at the three people with a deep gaze. The moment he saw Baixuan and the other two, he subconsciously frowned. Why do I feel that these three so-called elite astronauts are not in a good mental state? Before he could say anything, Han Kaiming on the side smiled and introduced them. Everyone, let me introduce you. This is Professor Lu Yongchang, the first director of the Zaya National Space Administration. Professor Lu, these three are the three reserve members of the original space station project. I remember, they have 3 spaceflight experiences. As soon as Han Kaiming finished speaking, the eyes of the 3 people suddenly lit up. Space Administration? Exclamation mark. Chapter 66. Are you interested in participating in this project? The three of them looked at each other. Han Fan couldn't hold his temper and asked first, Professor Lu, excuse me, is Xia's space station project really going to be cancelled? Lu Yongchang was slightly stunned. Xia's space station project was cancelled. He looked at Han Kaiming beside him with a puzzled look. Minister Hong, the space station project. Han Kaiming smiled bitterly. Professor Lu, you are the director of Xia's space agency after all. Don't tell me that you don't know about such a big thing. Lu Yongchang, ahem. Seeing the guilty expression on Lu Yongchang's face, the helplessness in Han Kaiming's eyes became more and more intense. He sighed deeply and then explained. A few days ago, the chairman of the parliament personally ordered to stop the half-conducted Xiago space station project. Why? Han Fan's indignant voice came from the side. Is the chairman of the parliament ready to give up exploring space? Han Fan Bai Yixuan shouted. Don't talk nonsense. Just listen to Minister Hong. Han Fan lowered his head in dissatisfaction. Han Kaiming smiled and waved his hand. It's okay. It's okay. The Xiago space station project was suddenly cancelled. I can understand your feelings. As for the reason for the cancellation of the space station, you should ask Professor Lu. He should know the reason best. As he said, Han Kaiming glanced meaningfully at Lu Yongchang beside him. The next moment, three pairs of eyes focused on Lu Yongchang's face. Lu Yongchang. He glanced at Han Kaiming beside him with a resentful look. Well, although he didn't know the specific reason, he could almost guess it. Facing the three astronauts' doubtful and slightly angry eyes, LV Yongchang subconsciously reached out and touched the tip of his nose and said with embarrassment, simply put, the original Xiago space station has lost its value of existence. What? Bai Yixuan's eyes widened suddenly, and he exclaimed in a low voice. That's a space station. There are only a handful of countries on the entire Earth that have independent space stations. Its scientific research value is unimaginable. That's right. LV Yongchang nodded gently and said vaguely, in order to cope with future crises, Xiago needs to focus on more valuable places. Because of the confidentiality agreement, some information cannot be clearly told to the three people in front of him. Especially the information about the solar mutation. Only when the three astronauts confirm to join the space shuttle project can he tell the three people the specific content. Xia Wanyi, who was standing aside, suddenly dimmed her eyes when she heard LV Yongchang's words. This set of rhetoric again. As vague as ever, she sighed deeply and asked softly, since Professor Lu thinks the space station has lost its value, why did you ask the three of us today? Since Xia Guo thinks space has no value to explore, what does it want us astronauts to do? Why not, let's go home and rest? At this moment, even Bai Yixuan did not speak out to stop Xia Wanyi's words. Just as the atmosphere in the hall gradually became stiff, Lu Yongchang raised his mouth slightly, chuckled and said, who told you that space has no value to explore? It's just that a space station project was cancelled and you want to retire. Bai Yixuan's heart beat violently. He opened his mouth slightly but didn't know what to say. A hoarse voice sounded on the side. Professor Lu, what do you mean? What do I mean? Lu Yongchang smiled even more. I have a better project here. I wonder if the three of you are interested in participating. Can I go to space? Xia Wanyi's voice was trembling a little. Of course not. Only space. You can also become the first astronauts of Xia country to land on the moon. LV Yongchang's light words were like thunder from the ground, directly shocking the three young astronauts. Entering space. Landing on the moon. These 8 words kept echoing in Xia Wanyi's ears, and gradually, the world in front of her became blurred. Excited tears filled her eyes. How about it? Are you interested in participating? Of course. I'm willing. Bai Yixuan and Han Fan's voices sounded on the side. What about you? Xia Wanyi. LV Yongchang's question came because she was too excited. She couldn't say a word for a while and could only nod desperately. Seeing this, Bai Yixuan smiled and patted Xia Wanyi on the shoulder. Well, it turns out that our persistence in training is still rewarding. Looking At the scene in front of him, Yongchang's eyes showed a touch of emotion. Ever since the first ape looked up at the starry sky, the desire for the endless universe has been deeply ingrained in human genes. When the three people's emotions gradually calmed down, Yongchang's face became slightly serious. I'll tell you in advance that you will participate in Zaya's first aerospace plane project. Although you have a lot of spaceflight experience, it is far from enough as an aerospace plane pilot. Therefore, you need to go to the Air Force pilot training base for a month of special training. This training will be very tiring and hard. You, Professor Lu, don't worry, we will complete the training mission. Baixuan interrupted Yongchang's words directly. Yongchang was stunned for a moment, then nodded with a smile. That's good. I'll wait for you at the National Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. I hope you won't disappoint me. America. CIA building. There was a rush of footsteps in the bright corridor. A man in uniform held a document tightly in his hand and walked quickly towards the office at the end of the corridor. The moment he came to the door of the office, he stopped suddenly. Then he took a deep breath to calm down his somewhat violent breathing. Tuck tuck tuck. He raised his hand and knocked lightly on the office door. Come in. A deep male voice came from inside the door. He took another deep breath, then reached out and pushed open the office door. What's up? In the office, a white man with a hooked nose and a mean face looked at him with dark eyes. He swallowed slightly and reached out to hand the document in his hand to the man behind the desk. Director William, the spies from Zaya country have sent the latest information. William Blair looked slightly startled and then suddenly stood up from the chair. Quick, get the files. Upon hearing this order, the man hurriedly handed the document in his hand to him. William Blair quickly unfolded the document and looked at it carefully. Gradually, his face turned pale. Chapter 67. America. With all due respect, electric propulsion is garbage. This is impossible. William Blair's face was pale, and veins popped out on the backs of his hands holding the documents. The next moment, he suddenly raised his head, looked at the man in front of him who was delivering the documents, and shouted with a ferocious expression, "Quick! Prepare the car." Preparing a car? A trace of doubt flashed in the man's eyes, and he subconsciously asked, "Where are you going?" White House. William Blair reached out and grabbed his coat that was placed aside and opened the office door. In 10 minutes, I want to see the door to the White House. The White House of the United States. William Blair clutched the A4 paper recording the intelligence in his hand and rushed to the president's office in a hurry. Then without any surprise, he was stopped by two tall bodyguards. Let me pass. I have very important information to report to the president. As he spoke, William shook the document in his hand. Sorry, sir, it's Mr. Albert's nap time now, the bodyguard said expressionlessly. William Blair's eyes widened suddenly, and he even laughed in anger. WTF, do you know who I am? You are the director of the CIA, sir. The bodyguard continued calmly, but I still can't let you pass. Mr. Albert specifically told him that no one can disturb his nap. Sir, please be considerate of us. If we'll let you pass, we will lose our job. Another bodyguard added. TSK. William Blair sneered and glanced meaningfully at the two bodyguards in front of him. Okay, I hope you two will remember this today. Tell me, how long until the president's nap? 5 minutes. You can wait in the waiting area next to it. The bodyguard obviously did not take William's threat seriously and nonchalantly pointed to the chair in the aisle beside him. 5 minutes later, as an alarm sounded from the presidential office nearby, the two bodyguards reminded softly, "Director William, the president's nap time is over. You can go in." William Blair sighed deeply, stood up from his chair, and walked quickly towards the office door. Tuck tuck tuck. William adjusted his mood and gently knocked on the door of the president's office. Who? Just when William wanted to respond, Albert's voice sounded again. "Forget it. No matter who it is. Come in, William." The corners of his mouth twitched slightly before he pushed open the office door. William Blair. Albert rubbed his sleepy eyes, stretched and muttered in a low voice, "Why are you here?" Looking at the president, who was still asleep in front of him. The corners of William Blair's eyes trembled violently. He looked solemn and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency, the intelligence personnel from Xia State have sent a very important piece of information." Before he finished speaking, Albert raised his hand to interrupt William Blair's words. The next moment, Albert reached out and pressed a red button on the table point. While William Blair was still wondering, the door to the office behind him suddenly opened. A secretary in all uniform walked into the office carrying a cup of brown drink. Albert's eyes stayed on the beautiful secretary's legs wearing black stockings for a few seconds. Then he reached out and took the glass from the female secretary's hand and nodded slightly to William. "Coke, would you like a glass? By the way, what did you just say, William?" He had never been so speechless in his life. Although he had heard people say that this president was very unreliable, he never expected that it would be so ridiculous. Suddenly, he gave up the idea of snitching to the president. After all, looking at this, it is estimated that the two bodyguards will not be punished for this matter. He took a deep breath and calmed down the turbulent emotions in his heart. Then, he gritted his teeth and said, "Your Excellency, the intelligence personnel of Xia State have sent important information." After hearing the news from Xia, Albert's expression gradually became more solemn. He picked up the glass, took a sip of ice coke, and asked in a low voice, "What information?" Xia Geo has mastered the controllable nuclear fusion miniaturization technology, PFFT. Cough. President Albert coughed, grabbed a napkin from the side, and hurriedly wiped the coke stains on his desk. "What did you say? Controlled nuclear fusion miniaturization technology? How is this possible? Is the news reliable?" William Blair shrugged. "Of course it is reliable. Xia State officials have already recognized it, President." Albert's face turned ugly for a moment. Damn, he just spent a lot of money to buy a complete set of controllable nuclear fusion technology. As a result, he bought someone else's obsolete product. Historically, only the United States harvested leaks from other countries. Albert never thought that during his tenure, the United States would be severely harvested by the Xia Kingdom thousands of miles away. "Congressman Lee," Albert muttered to himself with gloomy eyes. William reached out and handed the document to Albert. "In addition, the intelligence officers obtained a piece of information. Xia Geo is developing an electric propulsion system and has cancelled the Long March 10th heavy lift launch vehicle research project. In my opinion, this is what we need to pay attention to." Albert was slightly stunned. "Electric propulsion system? What is this?" William Blair's eyes flashed with doubt, and he said uncertainly, "It should be a new type of propulsion. I suspect that this is related to Xiao's abnormal behavior in recent times. For the specific situation, I think you should ask our NASA director." Albert frowned, then picked up the black landline on the table. "Let Director Morton come to see me. By the way, there is Anthony. Let him come too." Half an hour later, a short, slightly bald man looked at Albert nervously. "Mr. President, do you have something to talk to me about?" "Morton, do you know about the electric propulsion system?" Looking at the slightly bald NASA director in front of him, Albert frowned and said, "Intelligence personnel sent information that Xiago is currently studying the electric propulsion system and has cancelled the original Long March 10th launch vehicle research project." Morton was stunned and asked in disbelief, "Electric propulsion system, Mr. President, are you sure it is an electric propulsion system?" Albert frowned even deeper. "Of course, I'm sure." Morton sneered, and a nervous look on his face dissipated. He shrugged lightly and said unhappily, "Mr. President, with all due respect, the electric propulsion system is garbage. Let Xiago study it. I don't think they can make any achievements on it." Chapter 68 Hidden Area 51. When he saw the confused looks on Albert and everyone around him, Moulton hurriedly opened his mouth to explain. "NASA began research on electric propulsion systems decades ago. To be precise, it should be research on Hall thrusters." Albert raised his eyebrows slightly. "Oh, was NASA's research successful?" Moulton's expression froze. He shook his head slowly and said with an embarrassed look on his face, "It's not a failure, but it's definitely not a success. The Current Hall thrusters can only reach tens or hundreds of millinewtons of thrust and are mostly used on deep space vehicles. Maybe you don't know what tens or hundreds of millinewtons means. Let me put it another way and you will understand. The maximum thrust of the Hall thruster is about tens of grams. In the atmosphere, it can't even push an egg. Albert suddenly understood point, but soon his brows furrowed again. Then why did ZRGUO cancel the Long March 10th launch vehicle research project? Faced with this question, Moulton fell silent. This is indeed a doubtful point. After all, he is just a director, not a researcher. Lack of scientific research intuition is also normal. How about I find time to ask the NASA professor? Albert slowly shook his head. Since this Hall thruster does not play a big role in the atmosphere, then there is no need to worry about it. What's more, we can't be sure whether these two pieces of news are smoke bombs specially released by ZRGUO. Ever since he learned that ZRGUO turned around and took out the second generation nuclear fusion technology after selling the first generation fusion reactor technology, Albert had some psychological shadows in his heart. The most important thing now is how we should deal with this series of operations by ZRGUO. Moulton nodded respectfully and said in a low voice, in my opinion, we don't need to pay attention to the news released by ZRGUO. After all, we have suffered enough in the matter of nuclear fusion. If they want to study Hall thrusters, let them study it. I believe that chemical fuel rockets are the best choice for mankind at present. Albert's eyes moved slightly, and his deep gaze looked at Moulton again. How are the preparations for the Pathfinder plan? Moulton looked slightly stern. Preparations have begun to slow. Albert's brows frowned instantly. Just starting preparations. According to the current development speed of the Zaya Kingdom, by the time their preparations are completed, their red flags may be all over the moon. Anthony, who had been silent, pursed his lips and winked at Moulton beside him. Moulton, I think it's time to start that project. Moulton's expression changed slightly, and he asked in a low voice, Anthony, are you sure? Anthony closed his eyes slightly and took a deep breath. I'm sure the United States can be one step behind, but it must not fall behind others again and again. Albert, on the presidential chair, he frowned and interrupted the two of them. Wait. What are you talking about? What project? Anthony suddenly turned his head and looked at Albert. Your Excellency, President, I apply to start the Area 51 project. Seeing Anthony's burning eyes, Albert's expression suddenly became strange. Huh? Area 51? Isn't that thing just an Air Force base? The next moment, Moulton's voice rang. Your Excellency, on the surface, Area 51 is indeed just an Air Force base, but in fact, Area 51 is the core base of the United States High-End Technology Reserve Plan. The expression on Albert's face became increasingly weird. Hey, gentlemen, that's not a funny joke. High-End Technology Reserve Plan? How come I never knew the United States had such a plan? The voice of Defense Secretary Anthony then came. The High-End Technology Reserve Program was started 50 years ago. The purpose is to reserve various high-end technologies and ensure that the United States is in a leading position in the world in the future. During this period, in order to ensure that secrets were not leaked, only the successive secretaries of defense and NASA administrators knew about it. Not only you, but even the previous presidents of the United States did not know the existence of this plan. President Albert's expression suddenly suffocated. Well, successive presidents don't know that. His mentality calmed down a little. But soon, he thought of a very important question. What about funding? Why have I never seen the so-called Area 51 funding budget on the budget sheet? Anthony said with an embarrassed look. This funds can be faked after all. About 10% of military expenditures over the past 50 years have been secretly flowing to Area 51. Albert's breath suddenly suffocated. Good guy! 10%. This is 10% of the United States annual military expenditure. A whole 50 years of spending. Albert couldn't even imagine what stuff was being studied inside. He took a deep breath and asked softly, can I ask what technology is stored in it? Anthony and Moulton looked at each other, and then Anthony nodded slightly. Of course, the last Cold War made us deeply aware of the importance of space hegemony. Therefore, Area 51 mainly reserves some technologies in the aerospace field. For example, an enhanced version of the Saturn V, the Saturn's sixth launch vehicle. Albert's pupils shrank suddenly. As a native of the United States, Albert is naturally familiar with the world-famous Saturn V heavy lift launch vehicle, as the heaviest launch vehicle ever used in human history. The Saturn V rocket is 110.6 meters high. The takeoff weight reached an astonishing 3038.5 mils. And the total thrust reached an ultimate 3408 mils. Because it was used for manned missions to the moon, it is also called a moon rocket. Albert swallowed slightly and said in a very difficult tone, Saturn 6th. What is it used for? Moulton took over and said softly, Your Excellency, it was developed for Mars. Currently, there are 3 completed Saturn 6th heavy lift rockets hidden underground in Area 51. Mr. President, as long as you order the unlocking of Area 51, the Zaya Kingdom is not even worthy of being compared with our great United States. Moulton's words made Albert's heart surge. He wished he could see the American stars and stripes planted on the surface of Mars right now. He took a deep breath, calmed down his turbulent mood, and said firmly, Get ready to sign the presidential decree. Start the Area 51 plan. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. The space plane is completed. Zuanv number 1. Xiago point a certain Air Force training base. Bei Yixun, with a pale face, supported his waist and looked up at the blazing sun in the sky. But, it's finally over. Han Fan's unique hoarse voice came from the side. My god, I don't want to come to this training base again in this life. Hearing Han Fan's complaints, Bei Yixun pulled a bitter smile from the corner of his mouth, shook his head and said, Don't talk about you. I don't want to see this training base again. Han Fan's eyes lit up slightly. Brother Zuan, you can't hold on. This is a rare situation. This is the first time I see you. Brother Zuan, given. Bei Yixun glanced at Han Fan unhappily, said unhappily, What a joke. I'm not a robot. I can't stand this kind of intense training. A crisp laugh came from the side. I think Brother Fan is right. Since I met him, I haven't seen Brother Zuan complain about the training content. Bei Yixun turned his head and looked at Zaya Wanai, who was smiling behind him, helplessly. Look at your energetic appearance. How about I contact the coach and fly another circle in the sky? The smiles on Zaya Wanai and Han Fan's faces disappeared instantly. The two shook their heads like rattles. What a joke. Fly another circle in the sky. Recalling the scene when they first arrived at the training base a month ago, the two shuddered slightly under the scorching sun. The 3 people who had just arrived at the training base were dragged onto 3 training planes without any theoretical foundation. It is called practical operation is the best teacher. So, the 3 astronauts were severely tossed by their respective coaches' Cobra maneuver. Nester of somersault. Although the 3 astronauts have good physical fitness, they are still tormented by these fancy movements. After experiencing the torture of the first day, from the second day, the daily life of the 3 astronauts was fixed on their respective training aircraft. In just a few months, the cumulative flight time of the 3 people even reached an astonishing 300 hours, on average. Each person has to spend a full 10 hours on the plane every day. It can be said that in this month, except for eating and sleeping, the 3 people spent almost all their time on the training aircraft. Finally, it's over. Zaya Wanai shook her head, threw away these painful memories, then stretched and sighed softly. Next, we should go to Professor Liu, right? I don't know if the so-called aerospace plane is ready. Bei Yixun glanced at Zaya Wanai's figure when she stretched, and said unhappily, Don't be happy too early, Professor. Liu said that after the training at the Air Force training base, we still need to train on the aerospace plane. Zaya Wanai smiled, shook her neat short hair and said, It's okay. After all, it can go to space. As long as I think of this, I don't feel tired. Looking at Zaya One Eye's bright smile, Baekhyun couldn't help but lose his mind for a moment. A burst of engine whistling sound came from above. Baekhyun's eyes moved slightly, and he looked up at the armed helicopter slowly landing in the sky, and whispered to his teammates around him, "It's time for us to set off." In a factory outside the National Aerospace Research Institute of Zaya Country, a streamlined aircraft with a dark black body was quietly parked in at point. The structure of the aircraft is similar to that of the US B-2 bomber. The biggest difference from the B-2 bomber is that its wing size is not as exaggerated as that of the B-2 bomber thanks to the powerful power system. The total length of the fuselage is 30 meters, and the wing length is only 25 meters. The tail of this aerospace plane is 10 black circular hole thruster jets. The description of the engine appearance at the beginning of chapter 63 has been corrected. Yongchang stood in front of the aerospace plane, his eyes full of admiration. This is the first aerospace plane in the true sense of Zaya Country. It is no exaggeration to say that this aerospace plane symbolizes the highest level of human technology at this moment. Professor Liu, how about you give it a name? Academician Ko Liankei's voice came from the side, interrupting Liu Yongchang's immersed thoughts. Liu Yongchang's eyes moved slightly, and he said without hesitation, "Let's call it Zuan number 1, Ko." Liankei was slightly stunned, obviously remembering the three major plans of Zaya State that Liu Yongchang introduced some time ago. Zuanv, series of aerospace planes in the Nanshanman plan. Ko Liankei raised his eyebrows slightly and asked softly, "Why, you are not really going to make that Nanshanman plan, LV?" Yongchang chuckled and looked at Zuan number 1 in front of him with deep eyes again. "Of course, not only the Nanshanman plan, but also the Xianting plan will be realized in the future." Ko Liankei glanced at Liu Yongchang with a strange expression. Xianting plan, the huge fleet composed of 2,500 starships. He chuckled and shook his head slowly. "What a joke. That thing, I guess you can only see it in science fiction movies." "What? Don't believe it?" LV Yongchang saw Ko Liankei's action from the corner of his eyes, then turned his head and looked at him with a smile and asked. Ko Liankei was a little speechless for a moment. "Is this a question of belief or not? Any normal person would not believe it, right? How about we make a bet?" After the manufacture of Zuan number 1 was completed, LV Yongchang's mind became more active. Ko Liankei nodded without hesitation and said, "What's the bet, LV?" Yongchang couldn't help but fall into deep thought. "Hehe. Professor Liu, if our Zaya kingdom really realizes a heavenly court plan in 15 years, I will eat this Zuan number 1 on the spot." Looking at LV Yongchang thinking seriously, Ko Liankei said happily. LV Yongchang glanced at Ko Liankei speechlessly. "Dao, the flags are all full." He shook his head slightly and said unhappily, "Forget it. This Zuan number 1 will be a souvenir when the time comes. I'm afraid you can't afford it." "How about this? If it really comes true, you can treat me to a meal. I want to eat chicken leg rice from Sandaokao University." Ko Liankei was also speechless. "Professor Liu, are you serious?" Seeing Liu Yongchang nodding seriously, Ko Liankei smiled bitterly and touched his nose. "Okay, then it's settled. If it doesn't come true, you can treat me to a meal." Just as Liu Yongchang and Ko Liankei were chatting, a researcher hurriedly ran to Liu Yongchang and whispered, "Professor Liu, 3 aerospace plane pilots are here." Liu Yongchang's eyes suddenly lit up. "The pilots are finally here. Come on, let's go and welcome the pilots. Whether this big guy can go to the sky depends on these 3 people." Liu Yongchang greeted Ko Liankei and turned to walk towards the factory gate. Chapter 70. Don't you want to go to heaven? LV Yongchang had just arrived at the main entrance of the institute when he saw the 3 pilots of Zuan number 1 next to the helicopter landing pad. Perhaps because they had just come out of the Air Force training base, the 3 astronauts still looked confused and tired. Baekhyun, LV Yongchang's voice reached the ears of the 3 astronauts. Baekhyun, the leader, heard his name and subconsciously turned his head to look in the direction of LV Yongchang. The moment he saw LV Yongchang, Baekhyun's eyes suddenly lit up, and then he greeted his 2 companions with excitement. "How is it? When the three astronauts trotted to him, LV Yongchang chuckled and asked, "How are the results of this month's training?" Han Fan shuddered suddenly, and a trace of sadness appeared on his face that was originally full of smiles. "Professor Lu, please stop talking. You don't know how we spent this month." LV Yongchang's eyes were full of smiles, and he raised his eyebrows and said, "I told you in advance that the training here will be more tiring than that at the Air Force Base." The moment he heard this, Han Fan's face suddenly became bitter. "What? Want to give up?" Lu Yongchang looked at Han Fan with interest, who was making a bitter face. "No, no, no." Han Fan shook his head repeatedly. "What? A joke? It's come to this point. How can I give up? I still want to be the first astronaut in Zygo to land on the moon." LV Yongchang smiled and nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will give you this opportunity. Now, let's go and see your future car first." Hearing this, the eyes of the three astronauts became hot. When the three astronauts saw the flamboyant and mysterious appearance of Zuan number 1, their mouths couldn't close. Fuck. 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 Han Fan excitedly exclaimed, "Is this thing really from our Tsar country?" Even Bai Yixun, the calmest of the three, had a flash of surprise in his eyes. Zaiwanai's slender hands trembled slightly as she brushed the cold shell of Zuan number 1. The cold touch from her fingertips did not extinguish the fire in her heart at all. There was a flash of obsession in her eyes, and she murmured to herself, "It's so beautiful." The reactions of the three astronauts fell into Lu Yongchang's eyes, and a smug smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. This is his masterpiece. Even in his previous life, he didn't build a flying machine of this level. After all, most of his energy at that time was in the construction and research and development of the underground city. "Let's go. I'll take you to see the cockpit." He smiled and greeted the three people. Hearing this, Han Fan swallowed his saliva subconsciously and said tremblingly, "Can we go to the cockpit?" LV Yongchang. He glanced at Han Fan with a strange look on his face. "What? You don't want to drive this space plane?" Bai Yixun and Zaiwanai glanced at Han Fan with a look of idiot. Han Fan. LV Yongchang shook his head in confusion and turned to walk towards the boarding gate under the fuselage. Because a small fusion reactor is used as the power source, and this space plane mainly performs scientific research and transportation tasks, the fuselage space of Zuan number 1 has been released to a great extent. In front of the cockpit are 3 tempered glass portholes made by special technology. These 3 tempered glass cannot only resist the impact of most of the fragmented meteoroids in the solar system, but also filter out harmful rays and overly strong visible light in the universe to a large extent. Behind the porthole is a control console full of various control buttons and instruments. The control console is very large, and it takes 3 pilots to complete all the operating tasks. This is also the main reason why Zuan number 1 needs 3 pilots behind the control console are 3 tall and spacious driving chairs. Considering the long flight time of the aerospace plane, the 3 seats are designed based on ergonomics. Zaiwanai noticed the 2 slightly simple chairs behind the driving chair and asked Lu Yongchang softly, "Professor, these 2 chairs, passenger chairs?" Lu Yongchang answered directly, "This is also for future scientific research tasks." Zaiwanai nodded thoughtfully. It seems that the role of this Zuan number 1 is far beyond her imagination. Oh my god. Bai Yixun subconsciously slowed down his steps, walked to the front of the sophisticated control console, and reached out to gently touch the buttons on the console. His pupils trembled slightly, and he whispered softly, This is simply a scene in a science fiction movie." The next moment, he turned his head and looked at Lu Yongchang with burning eyes. "Professor Lu, when can we fly this space plane?" Bai Yixun's question instantly attracted the attention of the other 2. Han Fan and Zaiwanai cast their expectant eyes on Lu Yongchang. LV Yongchang frowned slightly, and after a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "It's hard to say." Seeing the look in the eyes of the 3 people suddenly dimmed, he smiled and added, "It depends on the effect of your training. You need to conduct driving training in the simulation cabin. After all, there is only one of this thing. If something goes wrong, I can't take the responsibility." "What about the training effect?" Han Fan's hoarse voice sounded. "The training effect is good." LV Yongchang's smile became even bigger. If you can practice well in one night, I will apply to the chairman of the parliament for a test flight tomorrow. After hearing this, Han Fan's breathing became obviously faster, looking at the three people in front of him with excited expressions. LV Yongchang's eyes flashed a sly smile. This is the effect he wants. He firmly believes that after this stimulation, the training efficiency of the three astronauts will definitely double. After sending the three astronauts to training, LV Yongchang looked at Zuan number 1 in front of him and murmured to himself, "Sometimes I really envy them." Huh? What did you say? KO. Liang K looked at LV Yongchang with a strange look on his face. Envy? Who do you envy? Bei, Yixin and the others. LV Yongchang's face was full of longing. Don't you want to ride this big guy to the sky once? No. KO. Liang K curled his lips and said unhappily, I don't want to feel the feeling of not being able to touch the ground. Besides, you can't ride this thing to the sky. LV Yongchang was slightly stunned and subconsciously asked back, why? The chairman of the parliament will not agree to you doing this kind of thing. KO. Liang K rolled his eyes. You don't know how important you are now, do you? LV Yongchang nodded silently and didn't reply. In the depths of KO Liang K's eyes, a hint of contemplation slowly emerged. Chapter 71 Eagle Sauce. Do you think the pancakes I made are delicious? Half a month passed by. In a flashpoint, the training program for the three astronauts has also come to an end. Looking at the training progress reports one after another, Lu Yongchang couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. I have to say that the person Han Kaiming chose for him is indeed good. The comprehensive quality of these three astronauts is definitely one of the best among all Xia Kingdom's astronauts, coupled with the excitement of the pie drawn by Lu Yongchang before training. The combined effect of the two even made him unable to believe his eyes. Fusion reaction rate control, Hall thruster power control, aerospace aircraft taking off and landing on the ground, taking off and landing on the moon. The original 1-month training program was compressed into just 15 days. Lu Yongchang put down the training report in his hand, pondered for a moment and then picked up the landline phone on his desk. Within the first ring of Xia Kingdom's capital city, tuck tuck tuck, a rapid knock on the door made the old man, who was immersed in reviewing documents, frown. Come in. The old man put down the pen in his hand, breathed a sigh of relief, and said in a deep voice. The heavy wooden door of the office was slowly pushed open. The moment he saw the visitor, a look of astonishment flashed in the old man's eyes. Academician KO? Why are you here? The old man looked solemnly at Academician KO Liang K standing at the door and asked softly, what? Is there something wrong with the Zuan number 1 project? KO. Liang K quickly shook his head and then said in an excited voice, President, I'm here to report to you on the progress of the Zuan number 1 project. This morning, the Zuan number 1 project was completed. The old man's expression suddenly froze. The next moment, he stood up from the chair with a loud sound and looked at KO Liang K in front of him with burning eyes. Is this true? After hearing the chairman's question, KO Liang straightened up and responded loudly with a serious face. It's absolutely true. Currently, the Zuan number 1 pilot has completed all training projects. Zuan number 1 has made all preparations and is ready for test flight at any time. Okay. The counselor laughed loudly. Without further ado, the test flight time will be, as he spoke, the congressman glanced at the calendar on his desk. Let's set it in 3 days. Right. The chairman's eyes flickered and he whispered, this test flight will be broadcast live on the entire network. Xia GUO, it's time to show off your muscles to the world. In the evening of that day, Xia GUO news channel broadcast a news on the TV. The host said a piece of news with a smile that shocked Xia GUO and even the world. The latest news from our station is that the research project of Zuan 1, Xia's first aerospace aircraft, was a complete success. In 3 days, Zuan 1 will conduct its first test flight, according to the latest order issued by the Xia State Council. This test flight test will be broadcast live on the full frequency band. The moment the news was broadcast, there was an uproar. Did I read that correctly? Zuan number 1. Isn't this something from the Nanshanman plan announced not long ago? Damn. Rabbit. Is this serious? Eagle. Source. Rabbit. Do you think my cake looks like it? Rabbit. Eagle source. Do you think my pancake is delicious? Stop talking. I've already asked for leave. Let's see you on the shark fighting. Live broadcast in 3 days. Daosha? Are you sure Daosha has this live broadcast? The news has said that full band live broadcast. Daosha must have it. Different. From the reaction of Xiaguo netizens, there was a series of negative voices on foreign Twitter. Hahaha, I'm laughing so hard. You're even flying in the air. Is Xiaguo crazy because he's dreaming? TCH. This is definitely another smoke bomb. Originally, I thought that Xiaguo's harvesting of dozens of countries with nuclear fusion was enough of a trap, but I didn't expect that he could do this to me now. The current Xia country reminds me of the United States a few decades ago, where everyone was all bragging. Stop talking about it. If there really is a space plane, I will broadcast the butterfly swimming in the cesspool. Butterfly swimming is nothing. I'm swimming in a cesspool. Both. A view upstairs. I've already taken a screenshot. Remember to send a link when the live broadcast begins. 3 days later, shark fighting. Live point at 12 noon. A live broadcast room appeared on the homepage of Dao Shark Live on Time. Xuanv. Number 1 test flight live broadcast. The title is unremarkable, but from the moment the live broadcast room appeared, the number of viewers began to skyrocket. Xiaozi sat at the computer desk and excitedly controlled the mouse to open the shark fighting live room. Black screen. The next moment, dense barrages appeared on the black background. Open the door. Open the door. You are capable of live broadcasting test flights, but you are not capable of opening the door. Is my phone broken? Why can't I see the picture? That's right. Your phone is broken, and we all saw the picture. Looking at these nonsensical barrages, the corners of Xiaozi's mouth twitched slightly. I have to say that the saying that netizens have more fun is sometimes true. Just when he was about to tap the keyboard to send a barrage to participate in the interaction, the scene in the live broadcast room suddenly changed. A dazzling white light appeared in the lens. My eyes were blinded by the flash. Pay for it. Okay, tell me your address, and community staff will come to your door immediately to send you warmth. Excuse me. After a few seconds, the camera image gradually became clearer the moment he saw the picture. Xiaozi suddenly stopped breathing. In the camera, there was a long runway. At the beginning of the runway, there was a black plane with a sci-fi feel. The live broadcast room also fell into silence in an instant. But the next second, a barrage of bullets appeared on the screen instantly. What is this? Why does it look so much like the USB 2? Fuck. It's amazing. It's just a little bit similar. Although I don't know the specific size, it can be seen from the approximate proportion that the wingspan of Xuanv number 1 is much smaller than that of B2. Just as a group of netizens were arguing wildly over there, a voiceover sounded in the live broadcast room. Hello, everyone. I'm Yi, the host of this test flight live broadcast. It's 12:15 Beijing time now, and there are still 30 minutes before takeoff. Before Xuanv number 1 takes off, let me give you a brief introduction to this aerospace plane. The United States, the White House. Albert looked at the screen on the TV with a gloomy face. In the screen, it was the live broadcast of the test flight of Xia's Xuanv number 1. Xuanv number 1 uses the latest Hall thruster, thanks to which its propulsion power can reach an astonishing 50 kilometers. Looking at the translation below the video, Albert's face became more gloomy. Morton, tell me, what's going on? I remember you seemed to say that the Hall thruster has no effect in the atmosphere. Chapter 72. Oh no, Professor Liu is missing. Faced with President Abbott's question, Moulton looked pale and shook his head. No, I don't know. The Hall thrusters previously developed by NASA definitely did not have such a large thrust. How about I ask Professor Austin, who was previously in charge of the Hall thruster project? Albert glared at Moulton hatefully and roared in a low voice. Why don't you go and ask? Moulton looked bitter, with a hint of grievance in his eyes. You obviously said you didn't need to ask the professor at the beginning. Huh? What did you say? Albert's face suddenly darkened. Moulton did not dare to reply, so he silently took out his mobile phone and dialed Professor Austin's number. The call was answered quickly. Professor Austin, this is Moulton. As soon as the call was connected, Moulton turned on the hands-free function and asked directly, I would like to ask, can the thrust of the Hall thruster reach 50 meters? No. Sound came from the microphone. Moulton frowned and asked softly again, Professor Austin, are you listening? Professor Austin's faint voice came from the microphone. Director Moulton, are you kidding me? That's not funny at all. Moulton glanced at the president beside him with an embarrassed look, coughed slightly and said, ahem. Professor Austin, the president is with me. I hope you'll think about it. After hesitating for a moment, Moulton spoke again and added, ZIGUO already has a Hall thruster with a thrust of 50 miles, and installed it on an aerospace plane. What? This is impossible. Austin exclaimed from the other end of the microphone. The current generator power is absolutely unable to support such a Hall thruster. Moulton's eyes moved slightly, and he asked in a deep voice, what if, Professor Austin, I mean what if, ZIGUO combined small nuclear fusion with Hall thrusters? Austin fell silent. From this silence, both Moulton and Albert got the answers they wanted. Okay, Professor Austin, I understand. That's it. Moulton hung up the phone feebly, then turned to look at Abbott. Your Excellency, President, perhaps we have completely lost this competition. No. Albert's eyes showed a bit of unwillingness. We still have the Pathfinder plan. As long as we take the lead in occupying Mars, we haven't lost yet. Inside, Zuanv number 1. Baixan and the other 3 were wearing flight suits and sitting quietly in their respective driver's seats on the console in front of him. A variety of indicator lights flashed with unique light. Call Hang Fan, who was sitting in the passenger seat on the left, took a deep breath. What? Are you nervous, Bay? Yixen's voice came from the side. Hang Fan smiled bitterly and shook his head. Brother Zuan, aren't you nervous? This is our first time to use a real machine. Bay Yixen shrugged and said nonchalantly, it's okay. I've never had any accidents during simulation training. Hang Fan's face suddenly became stiff. Is simulation training, although he only crashed once. The powerlessness of that crash caused a great psychological shadow on him. Okay. Zaiwan, who was sitting in the passenger seat on the right, chuckled. This is different from simulation training. There are 3 of us driving together now, so nothing will happen. That's right. Even if you don't believe in yourself, you still have to believe in my skills. Baixan said seriously. When I come back successfully this time, I will shut up. Before Baixan could finish his words, Hang Fan and Zaiwan stopped Baixan's flagging move in unison. An embarrassed smile flashed across Baixan's face after he realized it. Ahem. I didn't mean it. Zuanv number 1, pay attention. There is a 10-minute countdown to Kiev. While the 3 of them were chatting, Ko Lianke's voice came from the built-in earphones in the helmet. Baixan looked solemn and immediately pressed the radio switch to respond. Zuan Nu number 1 received it. Start the small fusion reactor now. As he spoke, Baixan turned a few buttons on the console in front of him. A certain amount of warm-up time is required before the fusion reactor is started. Therefore, Zuanv 1 needs to start the small fusion reactor 10 minutes in advance. After completing the operation, Baixan suddenly realized a problem. Where's Professor Lu? Why isn't Professor Lu in charge of the command? Hearing Baixan's question, a trace of doubt flashed across Hang Fan's face. Hey, I noticed it when you said that. Wasn't this kind of thing under Professor Lu's control before? Why didn't Professor Lu stop taking command at such an important moment today? At the same time, inside the temporary command center of the institute. Ko Lianke gently covered his right eye. For some reason, his right eye has been twitching since a few minutes ago. The left eye jumps for money. The right eye jumps. Ko Lianke shook his head and shook off his previous thoughts. Pooh. It's all feudal superstition. All the data of Zuanv number 1 normal. Ko Lianke asked the staff aside nervously. Everything is normal. The fusion reactor is being preheated and is expected to start within 5 minutes. What about the ground crew? Ko Lianke pondered for a moment and asked loudly. Point the next moment, a voice came. Everything is normal. The fuselage of Zuan number 1 is in good condition. The ground crew has checked it twice. Ko Lianke's right eyelid twitched twice again. There are still a few minutes. Check it again. Make sure there are no mistakes. As he spoke, he raised his wrist and looked at the time. Point there are still 8 minutes. What's wrong with this kid? Lu Yongchang. At such an important moment, he actually went to the toilet. Ko Lianke frowned, turned around and said to a researcher beside him, Go and pull Professor Lu over. No matter how urgent it is, he has to wait until Zuan number 1 is launched before he can go to the toilet. He is the person in charge of this project after all. At such a critical moment, what does it look like for him to just throw his sleeves and leave? Hearing Ko Lianke's scolding, the researcher's face turned bitter, and he quickly turned around and ran to the toilet of the institute. 5 minutes later, the researcher ran back in a panic. Ko academician Ko, it's not good. What's wrong? Perhaps because Zuan number 1 was about to take off. Ko Lianke's temper also became worse. Zuan number 1 is about to take off. Don't say these depressing words. Tell me what happened. The researcher stammered. Professor Lu, he's gone. Chapter 73 to Kiev. What? The moment Ko Lianke heard the researcher's words, he felt a buzzing sound in his brain. How could such a big person disappear? Ko Lianke stared at the researcher in front of him with bloodshot eyes and shouted angrily in an impatient tone, There are so many toilets in the institute. Have you looked for them all? The researcher was even about to cry. Faced with Ko Lianke's questioning, he shook his head with a bitter face. I have looked for them all, but I didn't see Professor Lu. Don't mention Professor Lu. There is no one in these toilets in the institute. Ko Lianke took a deep breath, turned his head and shouted loudly, Surveillance. Turn on the surveillance for me, academician. Ko, there is still 1 minute before the scheduled takeoff time. A reminder came from the side. Ko Lianke gritted his teeth and sighed heavily, saying, Forget it. Let's solve the Zuan number 1 issue first. Since Professor Lu is not here, I will command the entire test flight of Zuan number 1. While speaking, Ko Lianke reached out and picked up the radio receiver on the control desk. Attention. Zuan number 1, 30 seconds countdown to Kiev. Zuan number 1. The 3 pilots stared at the instrument data on the console in front of them. A figure in a white flight suit quietly appeared in a corner at the back of the cabin. The camera zoomed in, and the face in the helmet was Professor Lu Yongchang, who should have been in the toilet. Lu Yongchang walked lightly to the passenger seat behind the main driver's seat. Because the seats of the 3 driving seats were relatively tall, there was a certain blind spot in the field of vision, and the 3 pilots did not notice that there was an extra person on the chair behind them. He skillfully grabbed the seat belt on the seat and tied it to himself. Lu Yongchang's eyes showed a hint of satisfaction. Not bad, not bad. It's worth his sneaky training so many times. Click. The sound of the seatbelt buckle was particularly loud in the silent cabin. LV Yongchang's body suddenly stiffened, and his eyes trembled as he stared at the 3 pilots in front of him. Gulp. LV Yongchang's Adam's apple moved slightly, and he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The plane hasn't taken off yet. Once he is discovered, he can be 100% sure that he will be kicked off the plane at that time. A few seconds later, looking at the 3 pilots' faces as usual, LV Yongchang breathed a sigh of relief. It should be the headphones in the helmet that blocked the sound just now. Countdown 30 seconds. LV Yongchang's eyes moved slightly. It's time to take off. A hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. Zuan number 1 received. The output power of the small fusion reactor is normal. Prepare to start the Hall thruster. The voices of the announcement came from the headphones in the helmet. LV Yongchang couldn't help but get a little nervous. Even though he has lived to live, this is his first time riding an aerospace plane and entering space. 3, 2, 1, take off. With Ko Lianke's order, Bayekson who was in the main driving seat, pushed the joystick on the console with a firm look. A slight tremor came from the soles of his feet. The Hall thruster started. As soon as this thought flashed through LV Yongchang's mind, he felt that he was pressed against the back of the chair by a huge force. In the Dao Shall Live broadcast room, why hasn't it taken off yet? The flowers I've been waiting for have all withered. Just when a group of netizens were anxiously waiting, a steady command voice came. 30 seconds countdown to take off. Hearing this command voice, the netizens in front of the computer were suddenly refreshed. In the live broadcast screen, a faint blue flame slowly appeared at the tail of the Zhuan No. 1 aerospace plane. Fuck. What the hell is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So many Mach loops. Is this the tail flame of the Hall thruster? Love it. Someone roast me on the grill to cheer us up. The 30 seconds of waiting passed in a flash, and as the takeoff order was issued, the dark blue flame at the tail of Zhuan No. 1 suddenly increased several times. The next moment, driven by the Hall thruster, Zhuan No. 1 began to accelerate slowly. In just a blink of an eye, it arrived at the end of the runway, with the nose tilted upward. Zhuan No. 1 jumped into the blue sky. The moment this scene was recorded by the camera, there was a natural howling of ghosts in the live broadcast room. It's taking off. It's taking off. Fuck, this tail flame, this shape. I won't say anything more. A 10-year-old fan of Zhuan No. 1 came uninvited. Everyone says that Zhuan No. 1 is an aerospace plane. So where is the destination of this test flight? It can't just go around in the sky, right? The live host seemed to have seen this barrage and explained softly. The destination of Zhuan No. 1 this time is the geosynchronous orbit 36,000 kilometers from the surface. It's actually the geosynchronous orbit. Zaozuji, who was sitting in front of the computer, took a breath of cold air taking off from the surface and heading directly to the geosynchronous orbit. The power of Zhuan No. 1 is probably more exaggerated than everyone imagined, not to mention how many satellites of other countries are in the geosynchronous orbit, and not to mention whether Zhuan No. 1 carries weapons and equipment. Even if it directly drops a tungsten rod, the consequences are also something that most countries cannot afford. Under the high-speed camera, the figure of Zhuan No. 1 appeared clearly in the live broadcast. After taking off, the blue flame at the tail of Zhuan No. 1 increased again. Unlike ordinary chemical fuel engines, the tail flow of the Hall thruster is a high-speed plasma of hundreds of millions of degrees Celsius. Therefore, in the atmosphere, the tail flame of Zhuan No. 1 is particularly spectacular. There are countless Mach rings densely distributed in the 10-meter-long blue flame. Before a group of netizens could express their feelings, the nose of Zhuan No. 1 suddenly pulled up. Driven by the Hall thruster, the entire aircraft climbed up at a slope of nearly 90 degrees. Bang! A loud noise came from the sky. A beautiful sonic boom cloud instantly appeared around the fuselage. At the moment the sonic boom cloud appeared, the number of barrages in the live broadcast room suddenly increased by dozens of times. Fuck. Mom, come out and see God. Is this the speed of sound? My goodness, isn't the maneuverability of Zhuan No. 1 too strong? As Zhuan No. 1 plunged straight into the sky, cheers suddenly came from the institute. Listening to the celebrations around him, academician Ko Lianke secretly took off his glasses and wiped his eyes with his hand. How many years have passed? In the field of aerospace, Xiaoguo has finally surpassed the Western powers in a real sense. Before Ko Lianke could be happy for long, an alarm suddenly sounded. Academician Ko. The speed of Zhuan No. 1 has suddenly slowed down a lot. The track of Zhuan No. 1 has deviated from the planned orbit. Chapter 74 Slow down. Ko Lianke's expression changed drastically. Without any time to think, he directly grabbed the radio on the command platform and shouted loudly, "Call Zhuan No. 1, call Zhuan No. 1, please answer if you hear me, soon." Baixuan's response came from the radio. Ground Command Center, Zhuan No. 1 has received it, and there's a response. It seems that there is no big problem. Ko Lianke breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly asked, "What's going on? Why did the plane suddenly slow down and deviate from the planned orbit?" After A moment of silence. Bayek's slightly bitter voice came. Report, Lu. Professor Lu is on the plane. Go. Back a few minutes the moment Zhuan took off. Lu Yongchang, who was in the back seat, was pinned down on the passenger seat by the recoil force. After taking off, the recoil was slightly less, just as Lu Yongchang breathed a sigh of relief, and was about to say hello to the 3 pilots, an even stronger recoil pushed him back into his seat again. Unlike when taking off, the acceleration this time came quickly and urgently. Not only that, Lu Yongchang felt that his sitting posture had also deflected 90 degrees. The blood all over his body surged toward his brain under the influence of recoil and gravity, and Lu Yongchang's face instantly turned red. The consequences of an instant influx of large amounts of blood into the blood vessels of the brain. A chill flashed through Lu Yongchang's heart. It's not a good idea to go on like this. Waves of dizziness hit him, and alarm bells rang in his heart. He stretched out his hand, pressed the radio switch with difficulty, and said with difficulty on the internal channel of Zhuan number 1, slow down, fuck asterisk 3 exclamation point. Hearing the voice coming from the helmet radio, the 3 pilots trembled suddenly and uttered a soul-stirring phrase in unison. Bayek's hand holding the joystick trembled violently, and the fuselage of Zhuan number 1 also trembled violently. Fuck this time the modal particles came from Lu Yongchang's mouth. He suddenly regretted boarding the plane rashly. Under the operation of the 3 pilots, the acceleration of Zhuan 1 slowly decreased, and the fuselage gradually returned to stability. The fuselage has also returned to the normal range from an inclination angle of nearly 90 degrees. I'm alive. Lu Yongchang tugged on the collar of his flight suit, slowly exhaled a breath, and sighed softly. Professor Lu, we should say this. Hang Fan, who was sitting in the passenger seat on the left, turned around and looked helplessly at Lu Yongchang in the back seat. So, Professor Lu, why are you here? Sighed. Yes, Professor Lu, do you know how dangerous it was just now? Wan-ie, who was sitting in the passenger seat on the right, also joined the condemnation camp. She looked at Lu Yongchang with an annoyed look on her face and said angrily, fortunately, the power of the whole thruster was not very powerful just now. If the thruster power were more powerful and the acceleration was higher, you might not even have a chance to speak. Lu Yongchang smiled and coughed lightly. Ahem, isn't this just to go to space and have a look? This is also for my next research project. As for how it got up, I designed this plane after all. Can I not know where to hide someone? As he spoke, Lu Yongchang proudly patted his flight suit and seatbelt. Don't worry, I trained several times. 3 pilots. Just when the 3 of them didn't know what to do, Ko Liankei's voice came from the radio. What's going on? Why did the plane suddenly slow down? Yixin turned around and glanced at Lu Yongchang with a wry smile. Professor, how should I answer? Unlike the 3 astronauts, the old man Lu Yongchang said on the ground. Of course I tell Leo Ko the truth. Don't worry, nothing will happen. The bitter smile in Bayek's eyes grew stronger. Then he turned around, pressed the radio switch, and truthfully reported the situation inside Zhuan 1. What the hell? In just a few seconds, Ko Liankei's roar came over the radio again. Why did that kid Lu Yongchang go to your side? Where are the others? Let him speak. Ahem. Old Ko. A trace of embarrassment flashed in Lu Yongchang's eyes. He reached out and touched his nose and said softly, shut up. Don't get close to me. Ko Liankei, who was still on the podium, felt bad the moment he heard Lu Yongchang's voice. You get down here quickly. Lu Yongchang shrugged and responded calmly. Old Ko, calm down. I'm just taking a flight. Is it necessary to be in such a hurry? Ko Liankei was so angry that he laughed. Take a plane? You call this a plane ride? This is the first test flight of Zhuan 1. If something goes wrong, how can I explain it to Minister Hang? And representatively, calm down, calm down. Old Ko, you have to believe in the quality of Zhuan number 1, and more importantly, you have to believe in the skills of the 3 pilots. Lu Yongchang said cheerfully. No, Bayek's, I order you to return immediately and send Professor Lu down to me first. Ko Liang Ke stopped talking nonsense with Liu Yongchang and gave orders directly to Bai Yixun. No, we can't return. Liu Yongchang's expression suddenly became serious. Uncle, can I call you uncle? Ko Liang Ke didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why did you go to the sky for no reason, LV? Yongchang was silent for a moment and said in a low voice, I said that I would lead Xiago to the universe. It can't be that in the end. I, the director of the National Space Administration, have never been to space, right? This is a bit unreasonable, isn't it? What's more, seeing the universe with my own eyes will help me in my subsequent research. Academician. KO, I do scientific research just for this piece of starry sky above my head. Do you understand this? Hearing what LV Yongchang said, Ko Liang Ke fell silent. As a scientific researcher, Ko Liang Ke naturally understood the feeling of hearing the truth in the morning and dying in the evening. After a long time, he sighed slightly. Well, okay, you go, but I need to report this to Minister Hang and the Speaker of the Council. LV Yongchang's face suddenly fell. This, I'm afraid it's not good, right? They are so busy, there is no need to trouble them for such a small matter, right? No way. Ko Liang Ke snorted coldly and said unhappily, okay, I won't say any more to you. Where is Bai Yixun, academician? Ko, I'm here. Bai Yixun, who was in the main driver's seat, responded quickly. Remember, Professor Liu is the future of Xia country. No matter what method you use, you must send Professor Liu back to me safely. Do you hear me? Otherwise, you will be the eternal sinners of Xia country. Ko. Liang Ke spoke in a heavy tone. Yes. Bai Yixun's face became serious, and he responded loudly. Please rest assured, Chief. Chapter 75 Geosynchronous Orbit. After the radio communication ended, the atmosphere in the cabin suddenly became a little more solemn. Ahem. LV. Yongchang twisted his body uncomfortably. Everyone, don't be so dull. We still have to fly for a long time. Bai Yixun, who was sitting in the main driving seat, moved slightly and said in a deep voice, Professor Liu, please obey our instructions next. Hang Fan, check the seat belt for Professor Liu again. Yes. Hang Fan reached out to unbuckle the seat belt on his seat and stood up to check for LV Yongchang. I say, there's no need to be so serious, right? LV Yongchang looked at Hang Fan in front of him helplessly. I won't joke with my life. I've simulated it many times, and I guarantee that nothing will happen, Professor. LV, I'm a soldier, and obeying orders is my duty. Bai Yixun's faint voice came from the front. Since Academician Ko has given us an order, we will do everything we can to ensure your personal safety. Speaking of this, Bai Yixun's voice paused slightly. If something really happens, you can use my escape device to escape. There were originally 3 escape devices stored on Xuan number 1. Each escape device includes an ultra-high altitude parachuting device, protective clothing and oxygen cylinders. Although these devices cannot guarantee the safety of the driver in the outer space outside the atmosphere, they can still allow people to return to the ground safely within the atmosphere. After Bai Yixun's voice fell, the atmosphere inside the cabin of Xuan number 1 became heavier again. LV Yongchang was slightly moved. He subconsciously reached out and touched his nose and whispered, actually, I secretly brought a set of escape equipment up. It's behind the cabin. Bai Yixun and the other 2. Ahem. Professor Liu, we have reached the scheduled altitude. Next, the flight posture of Xuan number 1 will change. If you feel uncomfortable, please tell us. Bai Yixun changed the subject with a straight face. Awkward. Too embarrassing. He was even ready to sacrifice himself, but he actually brought a set of escape equipment with him. What is this? Thinking carefully, of course, if Liu Yongchang knew what Bai Yixun was thinking at this time, he would tell him righteously. Sorry, this is just a simple fear of death. He doesn't want to live his life again, but he is stuck in such a place for no reason. As Bai Yixun turned a few buttons on the console in front of him, a cold white light slowly lit up inside the cabin. Beep. As a reminder of the system self-check sounded, Bai Yixun's expression suddenly became much more solemn. The air pressure is stable. The Oxygen content is normal, the oxygen production equipment is operating normally, and the air filter is normal, the power of the whole thruster is normal. Get ready to accelerate. As orderly and compact reports came into LV Yongchang's ears, the flight posture of Zhuanv number 1 changed point as the nose gradually tilted up. Zhuanv number 1 was at a 60-degree angle to the ground point. The next moment, a stronger vibration came from under his feet. The rate of deuterium tritium bubbles in the small fusion reactor increased rapidly, and amazing energy was quickly released from the deuterium tritium atoms. Then, the blue flame at the tail of Zhuanv number 1 became stronger again. The huge recoil once again pressed LV Yongchang to the seat. Professor Lu, how is it? Can you bear this acceleration? Bei Yixian's question came from the side point from his voice. It seemed that such acceleration was very easy for him. On the other hand, LV Yongchang's face flushed slightly, and he nodded with some difficulty and said, don't worry, I can bear this acceleration. Za. One eye on the right turned her head and looked at LV Yongchang with some concern and whispered, how about, let's slow down a bit. In the dense atmosphere, the maximum flight speed of Zhuanv number 1 is about Mach 5. But in the high altitude space with thin atmosphere, after sufficient acceleration time, the maximum speed of Zhuanv number 1 can reach the first cosmic speed, 7.9 km/s, which is about Mach 23.2. After entering the geosynchronous orbit. Without the influence of the atmosphere, after a long period of acceleration, the flight speed of Zhuanv number 1 can even reach the amazing second cosmic speed, 11.2 km/s. This is also the minimum speed required for Zhuanv number 1 to go to the moon, but even so, because of LV Yongchang's physical condition, Zhuanv number 1 took a full 5 hours to reach the 36,000 km geosynchronous orbit point. Although it seems like a long time, compared with the time it takes for a satellite to enter orbit in the past, Zhuanv 1 is already very fast. Low orbit satellites, that is, near Earth orbits hundreds of kilometers from the surface of the Earth, generally only take a few tens of minutes from launch to orbit entry point. If it is a geosynchronous orbit of 36,000 kilometers, a satellite often needs to go through a long journey of nearly a month before it can successfully enter orbit. After all, the rocket will only push the satellite into a near-Earth orbit hundreds of kilometers from the surface of the Earth. And the rest of the journey will all depend on the satellite itself. As Zhuanv 1 gradually climbed in height, the scenery outside the porthole gradually changed. The distant horizon gradually turned into an arc with a crystal clear glow. Then, what came into LV Yongchang's eyes was a dark space, just like a pure black curtain, and on this pure black curtain, there were dotted with crystal gems with faint light. Those crystal gems with faint light are stars tens or even hundreds or thousands of light years away from the Earth. At the same time, a sense of weightlessness came over him. LV Yongchang, who experienced this feeling for the first time, frowned slightly. To be honest, it was not very comfortable. Professor, we are here. Bei Yixian's voice came into LV Yongchang's ears thanks to the good airtightness of the cabin of Zhuanv number 1 and various oxygen generating and air filtering devices. As long as they did not leave the cabin, they did not need to wear bulky spacesuits all the time. It's so beautiful. LV Yongchang's deep eyes looked through the porthole in front of him, staring at the distant starry sky intently. His heart moved slightly. That was the direction of Proxima Centauri. As a red dwarf star only 4.22 light years away from the Earth, its visible magnitude is 11, so LV Yongchang cannot observe it with the naked eye. But even so, LV Yongchang still felt inexplicably excited. Perhaps the future of mankind lies near that distant red dwarf star. Calling the ground control center. Calling the ground control center. Zhuanv number 1 has arrived in the synchronous orbit. Please give instructions. Bei Yixian's voice interrupted LV Yongchang's meditation. Received. Zhuanv number 1, report your situation. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.